Chapter 587. He stared at the ground and memorized the sequence of attacks. Then he slowly closed his eyes and established contact with the 90 attacking points in the outside world. His divine sense quickly spread out and enveloped the team members below. The teams disappeared one by one, and only one team remained. Their task was to be a substitute. Yu Qianqiu remained floating in the air with his eyes closed, maintaining contact with the 90 attacking points outside. The surroundings were quiet, and no one made a sound to disturb him. In a wilderness in Shimon country, a large area of rubble was piled up, forming a rocky hill. Experienced cultivators could tell that these were the rubble that had been produced by mining spirit stones. The rocky hill was a wasteland in the southern suburbs. Not even a single weed could be seen, and there were only piles of rubble. 300 masked men suddenly appeared out of thin air. The leader of the masked men quickly scanned the terrain and confirmed that it was their target. He faced the target and waved his arms forward. Attack according to the original plan. The 50th early-stage tribulation passing expert quickly leaped into the air and pounced toward the first target. The communication formation was the first point they had to destroy. They had to destroy it at all costs as quickly as possible. They could not give the other party any time to spread the news. Once the other party spread the news of the attack, it might immediately attract strong reinforcements nearby. Although they did not know if there were strong reinforcements nearby, they could not take this risk. The first attack had to break the other party's throat. They could not let the other party make any sound to the outside world. Because of this, 50 of the 100 most experienced cultivators at the early stage of the tribulation passing stage were sent out to destroy the enemy's communication point. Enemy attack. A terrified cry came from the high ground. However, it only managed to make one sound before it was dismembered by 3 lightning-fast flying swords. 3 masked men in black landed on the high ground. The leader was the leader of this team. He was also the leader of Utopia's first team, and enjoyed a high honor in Utopia. On both sides were the deputy leaders, and all 3 of them were early-stage tribulation-passing cultivators. The 3 of them stood with their backs facing each other, and coldly looked at the 200 or so team members who had surrounded the entire spirit stone mine in broad daylight. Although the 3 of them were very confident in their combined strength, it could be seen from the position they were standing in that they were constantly on guard. This was the result of a long period of actual combat training. His tactical attainments were extremely high, and he would not allow any accidents to happen because of his arrogance. He had to be careful in every battle and treat it seriously. Although there was only one warning cry, it was enough to alert everyone in the mine. Inside the cave, inside the stone house, a large group of cultivators flashed out. Everyone first looked towards the observation point, but what they saw were 3 majestic masked men. A burly man with a curly beard stood out from the crowd. He was obviously the most important person here. Just as he was about to shout at the 3 masked men, he saw nearly 50 men in black forming a triangular formation and rushing towards a cave. The mustached man's expression changed, and he immediately reacted. These people wanted to destroy the communication array that connected to the outside world. He immediately shouted, "Stop them! Protect the communication array!" The group of people quickly shot up into the sky and chased after them. The guards outside the communication array also rushed to intercept them. The first person in the front corner of the triangular assault formation quickly made 2 hand gestures, and the 50 people all threw out their arrow talismans. Dense yellow lights whizzed out like rain, and the people who rushed to intercept them were immediately thrown into confusion. The last row of 10 people in the triangular formation immediately turned around and rushed back after throwing out the arrow talismans. The flying swords in their hands flew out, forming a sword net to strangle the people chasing them. On the spot, dozens of people let out mournful screams. Blood rained down along with dismembered corpses. Such a fierce and swift attack immediately scared the people who rushed over, and they didn't dare to continue. Some people even turned around and fled without hesitation. The triangular formation that had been shortened by a section plunged into the crowd of people blocking them. Flying swords flashed fiercely, and miserable screams rang out continuously. 10 people separated from each side of the triangular formation to deal with the opponents outside the cave. The remaining 20 people formed a small triangle that went straight into the cave entrance. There were 6 core formation stage cultivators guarding the cave entrance. Seeing that the attackers were so powerful, they were already scared silly. They didn't even fight, but they knew that they couldn't stop them. 4 people immediately ran to the sides, and 2 people turned around and ran back into the cave. Unfortunately, the 4 cultivators didn't run away. They were already surrounded outside, and the only thing waiting for them was to be killed without mercy. As soon as the small triangle went into the cave entrance, it immediately split into an even smaller triangle. 10 people directly rushed into the cave, and the remaining 10 people guarded the cave entrance. Soon after, 2 screams came from inside the cave, followed by a series of chaotic explosions. Soon after, the 10 people who rushed into the cave came out. The leader of the small team made a gesture of success to the leader on the high ground, indicating that they had successfully destroyed the communication array. This only happened in a few moments. From the moment they launched their attack to the moment they destroyed their target, the small team didn't even stop and directly rushed into the cave. Even the cultivator who was preparing to send a message to the sect was killed before he could activate the communication array. The leader made a gesture to the small team leader, and the small team immediately became the main force of the cleanup. 5 people in a group, they quickly scattered and killed. It was unknown what the 2 vice leaders said to the leader, but the leader made a gesture to shrink the encirclement, and an even more bloody and tragic massacre began. For a moment, screams rang out everywhere, and in this bloody web of over 300 people, no one could escape the final misfortune. The whole battle ended very quickly. In less than an hour, the ground was already covered in pools of blood. The wind was bleak, and the blood was very thick. Many people's bodies were torn to pieces, and those who died in one piece died with their eyes wide open. Their lifeless eyes reflected a group of black-clothed people shuttling back and forth, cleaning up the battlefield. Anything that was worth a bit of money was taken away. The entire team quickly gathered. 2 of them were clearly injured, and it seemed that their injuries weren't clear yet. They were carried back to the team. The 3 people on the high ground also returned to the team at the same time. The leader took one last look at the battlefield. From start to finish, it took less than an hour, and the mission here was successfully completed. He took out a small black flag from his storage bag, and casually threw it at a large rock. With a ding, it stabbed into the rock. A gentle breeze blew, and the golden word hero fluttered in the wind. The leader raised his hand to touch the silver-coated nameplate on his chest, and injected his divine sense. All the team members did the same. Even the 2 injured team members were helped to cover the silver-coated nameplates on their chests. They would return together. They wouldn't leave them behind. In Utopia's military camp, Yuqiancho, who was floating in the sky with his eyes closed, frowned slightly. He sensed the fluctuations of divine sense from the outside world. His divine sense surged out and traversed to the outside world. In the blink of an eye, a group of people returned successfully. These people didn't have time to rest. They removed one of the 3 storage bags from their waists and threw it to the side. 2 of the injured team members were carried out of the formation. 2 people immediately flashed over from the reserve formation and joined the battle formation. Then the team disappeared from everyone's sight once again. They had completed one of the 3 attack points, but there were still 2 more that they hadn't completed their mission. Chu Ping waved her hand, and a group of women quickly flashed over. The 2 injured team members were carried away for treatment, and the storage bags on the ground were also cleaned up. After they left, another group of people returned after the battle. The various countries were mobilizing their manpower to snatch Yanjuashing, but Yuqiancho was taking advantage of the country's weakest defense to plunder the spirit stone mines. How could he let go of such a good opportunity? Everyone was afraid of Hero. Usually, there were many experts guarding the spirit stone mines, so it was very difficult to strike. Such an opportunity was hard to come by, so it would be a waste not to do it. If he wanted to do it, he might as well do it this time. It would probably be very difficult to succeed so easily the next time. Actually, Yuqiancho really wanted to strike at those places that were more profitable. Although spirit stone mines were places that produce spirit stones, very few people would store a large amount of spirit stones in a spirit stone mine in the wilderness. They would save up a little and send it back. However, it was different for the headquarters or branches of the world commerce. There were a lot of spirit stones circulating every day, so it would be a great harvest to strike a few of them. However, there were many people in such places, and they were all guarded by experts. It would be troublesome if they bumped into the experts who were doing business here. Not to mention the headquarters of the world commerce. Even the branches of the world commerce wouldn't dare to act rashly with Yu Qianzhou's current strength, let alone the headquarters of the world commerce. With Bing Qingzi, who was currently the third most powerful person in the world, it would be a lie if the other 5 people didn't care once he made a move. It wouldn't be worth it to fight Bing Qingzi with all his might without even seeing Yan Zhuixing. Yan Zhuixing shouldn't have escaped far. Let's find Yan Zhuixing first. When the time comes, there will be a way to pry open his mouth. Whether it's a groundless matter like what Bing Qingzi said, we will know once we ask. Pei Fong changed his tone. Since he had misgivings about using force with Bing Qingzi, he might as well use another method. You dare! Bing Qingzi shouted. The profound ice sword had already appeared in his hand, and his aura had directly locked onto Pei Fong. The latter's expression stiffened, and he looked at the other 4 people. Yin Baikong carried the God of Fortune sword and said indifferently, Brother Bing, everyone is here to clarify the matter. Everything will be clear once we find Yan Zhuixing. You better think it through. Don't go against the cultivators of the world. When the time comes, it won't look good for everyone. Bing Qingzi coldly stared at Yin Baikong, and his murderous aura was faintly discernible. The other 5 people immediately became alert. At this moment, high up in the sky, the sound of high-speed flying could be heard again. Everyone raised their heads and saw a white shadow flying over. Who else could it be other than the snow flood dragon? Immediately, someone clicked his tongue and said, A spirit beast is indeed a spirit beast. It's actually fine. There seemed to be 4 people sitting on it? Man Hu and the other 3, who were riding on the snow flood dragon, knew that the snow flood dragon was bringing them to find their master. However, when they saw the large group of people below from the sea of clouds, their expressions immediately changed. They had finally escaped from the wolf's den, but the snow flood dragon had sent them back. Wasn't this asking for death? Chapter 588. What does this snow flood dragon want to do? Yan Zhuixing asked. He even suspected that the sect wanted to offer him to settle the matter, but he felt that it was unlikely, because if Bing Qingzi wanted to harm him, the curse on his body wouldn't let him off. Man Hu punched the snow flood dragon's back and shouted, Snow flood dragon, turn around and run. Moo. The snow flood dragon responded with a loud cry. How could it run when its master was down there, and the person who beat it up just now? Shaking its head and tail, it rushed down with a whoosh. Master is down there, Old 7 exclaimed. Since Bing Qingzi was here, Yan Zhuixing could only bite the bullet and continue. At least for now, it would be safer to stay by Bing Qingzi's side. Otherwise, it would be difficult to escape. Under everyone's gaze, the snow flood dragon arrived with 4 people on its back. It circled around Bing Qingzi and his disciple and let out a soft moo. Man Hu and the other 3 also rushed to Bing Qingzi's side and saluted. Bing Qingzi was startled when he saw the 4. Then his face sank and he transmitted his voice to Man Hu. Since you escaped, why did you come back? You're courting death. Man Hu replied helplessly. We met the snow flood dragon on the way. Who knew it would bring us back? It's too late to escape. The snow flood dragon stared at the 5 with its red eyes and tensed its body, ready to attack at any time. It remembered clearly that it was these 5 people who beat it up just now. Suddenly, it heard its master snorting unhappily. It turned its huge head and saw its master staring at it coldly. After living together for so many years, it knew clearly that its master was going to teach it a lesson. It shrunk back in fear, not knowing what it did to make its master unhappy. It weakly let out a moo. Bing Qingzi saw its snow-white head and lower jaw dripping with blood. Obviously, it was injured before. His heart softened, and he turned his head away. Eldest senior brother. The bloodied 6th brother called out. Man Hu and the others looked over, and immediately revealed an expression of disbelief. They said excitedly, You're still alive. They hugged each other with obvious excitement. They had a lot to say, but they knew this wasn't the right place. You can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find it by chance. Pei Fong sneered as he stared at Yan Juexing. Many people here had never seen Yan Juexing before, but almost all of the soul formation experts present knew him, because they had met at Wen Lanfeng's place. Now it was as if a monster had seen Xuanzang. All of them had a greedy look on their faces. Aya. Yin Baikong put on a fake smile and said, I should have guessed it long ago. When Brother Bing's disciple was still in the Chinese cultivation world, he was always protecting Yan Juexing. Naturally, there must be a reason. It turns out that he was hiding a big secret. Hu Changshu, who had been silent all this while, also said, I didn't expect Brother Bing to be so scheming. Bing Chengzi had completely calmed down. If his disciples and Yan Juexing had escaped, he would have fought to the death. But now he couldn't afford to be impulsive. Don't be so weird here, you two. Others might not know, but don't you know? Do I look like an ambitious person? If I was ambitious, would I have waited until now? Bing Chengzi pointed at Yan Juexing and said, To be honest, this is my 8th disciple. I wanted to wait until he reached the Great Snow Mountain before officially announcing it to the public. I didn't expect everyone to be so impatient. When Yan Juexing was in the sacred ground of Baiwan Nation, he wanted to worship him as his master out of respect. But Bing Chengzi refused to be his master no matter what. Now that things had come to this, he could only use this reason. Yan Juexing glanced at Bing Chengzi without any expression. Yin Baikong and Hu Changshu looked at each other. From their expressions, it was obvious that they didn't believe Bing Chengzi's words. The former sneered and said, Traveling thousands of miles, bringing a spirit beast down the mountain, and even falling out with us. 8th disciple? Brother Bing, don't you think this is too far-fetched? Bing Chengzi immediately replied sarcastically, Those who are familiar with me know that I always treat all the disciples I accept as my own, regardless of whether they are close or distant. As for how you view your own disciples, I don't know. But don't put the same idea on me. Yin Baikong's face stiffened. It was indeed a failure to say such words in front of the disciples of the World Commerce Chamber. Everyone looked at the bloody old 6th, and seemed to have realized something. Sacrificing himself to save others was probably related to the friendship between the master and the disciple. But understanding was understanding. No one would believe Bing Chengzi's words. Pei Fong stared at Yan Juexing and shouted, Brat, if you don't have a guilty conscience, why did you escape? Yan Juexing said indifferently, I'm not a fool. I naturally know the terrifying consequences of this rumor. Do I have to be captured by you guys before explaining? If I really have a guilty conscience, I would have escaped earlier. Why would I return? There was no other reason. He just wanted to make this matter clear in front of the world, so that there wouldn't be endless torment. The rumor about me possessing an extraordinary martial art is purely Niu Yi trying to harm me. As soon as he said this, he hit the crux of the problem. Bing Chengzi immediately gave him a praising look. Everyone else was stunned. That's right. If there really was something shameful, why would he come back to die if he had already escaped? They naturally didn't know that Yan Juexing and the rest were brought back by the snow flood dragon. Everyone subconsciously looked at the bloody scene before them, and their expressions twitched. If it really was a rumor spread by Niu Yi, then this loss was not worth it. But no one would believe him just because of one sentence. Pei Fong's fat face shook as he sneered. That's hard to say. Maybe you knew that sooner or later you wouldn't be able to escape from our palms. You can escape today, but not tomorrow. So you purposely did the opposite and spread lies to mislead everyone. Hee. You've got guts. Do you really think we're so easy to fool? For Bing Chengzi's sake, as long as you tell us your extraordinary martial art, we can consider letting you go. That's right. The top experts looked at each other and echoed. Fatty Pei, I think you're really tired of living. How dare you threaten my disciple in front of me? Bing Chengzi shouted. He knew that in this kind of situation, he couldn't show any signs of weakness. Otherwise, everyone wouldn't mind joining forces to beat him down. Only by being strong would everyone have some misgivings. Man Hu and his fellow disciples also revealed a look of not hesitating to fight to the death. All of them held their weapons and cheered for their master. This scene made everyone secretly sigh. This was indeed a sect that was as close as a father and son. If it was their own disciple, he would have shown fear under the pressure of so many experts. How would he dare to risk his life against a spirit-severing expert? Master, please calm down. Yan Juexing bowed to Bing Qingzi and said, the more I argue, the clearer it becomes. Master, please allow disciple to argue. Bing Qingzi snorted and agreed. Thank you, Master. Yan Juexing turned to Pei Fong and said, may I ask Senior a question? Speak. Pei Fong sneered. Let's see what tricks you can come up with. Yan Juexing said calmly, from Senior's words, you seem to think that Junior has a peerless martial art. Do you think that my master already knew about this? Kid, it's not that I think so, but everyone thinks so. Pei Fong waved his broken hand and pointed to the surroundings. It's human nature. It's understandable. Yan Juexing nodded and said, may I ask Senior, if my master already knew that I had a peerless martial art and the ambition to conquer the world, would he let me live until now? Would he have allowed me to live until now? Wouldn't he have taken me to Snowy Mountain when everyone didn't know and forced me to use the peerless martial art to cultivate? Wouldn't that be safer? Wouldn't he have waited until Niu Yid misled the crowd and made everyone come here to kill each other? Then he would come to save me at all costs? Don't you think it's suspicious? This series of questions was thought-provoking. Especially the phrase kill each other. It made everyone's hair stand on end when they saw the bloody scene. What was Niu Yid trying to do? Was he trying to incite everyone to kill each other? Everyone couldn't help but ask themselves. Yes. If Bing Qingzi knew that Yan Juexing had a peerless martial art, he would have already made his move on Yan Juexing. Why would he wait for everyone to fight for it? The group of people judged Bing Qingzi's heart with their own selfish hearts, and felt that it was impossible. They looked at each other in dismay. Even Pei Fong was speechless. All of you are possessed. Bing Qingzi snorted coldly, but he looked at Yan Juexing with more and more admiration. He was indeed the inheritor of the demonic book. His ability to deal with emergencies was incomparable to ordinary people. Yan Juexing looked around and cupped his hands at everyone. He continued to strike while the iron was hot. Does everyone know who that Niu Yid is? Does everyone know where that Niu Yid came from? I'm afraid no one knows, right? I've even heard that Niu Yid cheated every one of your spiritual stones. I just can't figure it out. Everyone believes in the words of a big liar that everyone knows. This junior doesn't know what to say. Is it really that trustworthy? This guy was quite eloquent. If Yu Qianqiu heard him, he would probably jump out and argue with him to see who was better and who was better. Everyone seemed to have woken up from a dream, but none of them looked good. Thinking about how they were cheated by Niu Yid once, it was already a huge joke. If they were cheated by him again, how could they endure it? Many people had already cast their gazes at Shangguan Taiping. If it wasn't for him, how could this happen? Shangguan Taiping felt guilty from everyone's gazes. He had an awkward expression as he realized how hard it was to be a good person. Yin Baikong looked below with resentment. His world commerce had suffered the greatest loss. He then looked around and realized that there was still an endless stream of world commerce disciples rushing over. His face turned black as he slowly turned his head to look at the battered Sikongju. Sikongju's heart thumped, and he tasted bitterness in his mouth. This news was from his own disciple, and he had confidently told his master. If he was cheated again and caused such a huge loss, how could he raise his head in world commerce in the future? Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. Sikongju teleported in front of Yin Baikong and said with a bow, Master, one's words cannot be trusted. Niu Yid will be arriving at the headquarters in a few days. If this Yan Juexing is really magnanimous, why not let him follow us back to the headquarters? At that time, he will confront Niu Yid, and we will naturally be able to determine the truth. Chapter 589. Yin Baikong's eyes lit up and slightly nodded. That's right. Brother Bing, it's easy to prove your disciple's innocence. Let him follow me to the headquarters and confront Niu Yid. At that time, everything will be clear. If it really has nothing to do with Yan Juexing, I promise to send him safely back to Snowy Mountain. At the same time, he looked at Sikongju with a gentle gaze. This method was simply the best for him. Once Yan Juexing meets with Niu Yud, whether it's true or not, his world commerce wouldn't be able to escape. If Niu Yud could prove that Yan Juexing indeed had a peerless martial art, then everyone wouldn't need to fight over him anymore. Yan Juexing was already in his hands. If Niu Yud was lying, then he wouldn't be able to leave the world commerce so easily. One must know that the headquarters of the world commerce was filled with experts. With Yin Baikong personally overseeing it, 2 spirit-severing disciples, and a bunch of late-stage crossing tribulation experts, not many people in the cultivation world could come and go as they pleased. Yan Juexing didn't know what to say. There was no reason to refuse. He couldn't help but look at Bing Qingzi. Bing Qingzi naturally couldn't let Yin Baikong take Yan Juexing away. Although he repeatedly denied the fact that Yan Juexing had a peerless martial art, he was well aware that what Niu Yud said was true. Just think about it. Niu Yud was actually able to see through Yan Juexing's background with a single glance. With such ability, Yan Juexing would probably have nowhere to hide in front of him, and he wouldn't be able to hide it even if he wanted to. At that time, he would probably not be able to return. Everyone's gazes also looked at Bing Qingzi to see what he would say. To prove Yan Juexing's innocence, Sikongju's method was the best. If he didn't agree, then he definitely had a guilty conscience. Then don't blame everyone for being impolite and snatching what should be snatched. Yin Baikong, I don't deny that your method isn't good, Bing Qingzi said in a deep voice. But if I let you take my disciple away in front of me today, then where would I put my face in the future? If I can't even protect my own disciple, then as his master, I won't be able to show my face in the future. Hearing this, many people exchanged glances. Sure enough, he still had a guilty conscience. All of them stared at Yan Juexing with interest, eager to make a move. Yin Baikong smirked and said, Brother Bing, this won't do, that won't do. Do you have any way to prove Yan Juexing's innocence? Now that things have come to this, I'm sure you're also aware that this matter has to be resolved. Seeing that everyone was pressuring their master, the hot-tempered 7th disciple could no longer bear it and shouted, What have we done wrong to you? We need to prove our innocence to you. Yin Baikong's gaze was like lightning as he stared at the 7th brother. He sneered and said, This old man is talking to your master. Since when is it your turn to interrupt? Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped the furious 7th brother from speaking again. He said to Yin Baikong, I naturally have a way to prove Yan Juexing's innocence. Oh, then we'll be all ears. Yin Baikong put on a fake smile. Obviously, he didn't believe it. Everyone stared at Bing Qingzi, waiting to see what he could say. Bing Qingzi's cold eyes swept across the crowd. With a wave of his hand, the profound ice sword suddenly appeared in his hand. This action startled everyone. They all thought that he was going to make a move. Who knew that a dang sound could be heard? Bing Qingzi flicked the sword with his finger, and a crisp sound reverberated in the air. He raised the sword and said in a clear voice, I, Bing Qingzi, swear to the heavens that if my disciple Yan Juexing possesses a peerless martial art, let me, Bing Qingzi, die a horrible death in the future. Absolute silence. Everyone was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't expect Bing Qingzi to be so ruthless. He even made a deadly oath. This Yin Baikong and the others looked at each other. If they didn't believe it before, then what about now? Even if they were beaten to death, they wouldn't believe that Bing Qingzi would use his life to make a false oath. Man Hu and the others who recovered from the shock couldn't help but shout, Master! Yan Juexing silently stared at Bing Qingzi. He owed this sect too much. Only the few of them knew that Yan Juexing did possess a peerless martial art, the demonic book. However, their master made a false oath. This would definitely be punished by the heavens in the cultivation world. Bing Qingzi waved his hand at them and said, It's nothing. Since we can't explain it clearly to them, we'll use facts to prove it. Otherwise, we'll have endless troubles in the future. He then stared at the 5 of them and said indifferently, Everyone, do you believe me now? Pei Fong, Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangda looked at each other. They felt it was a pity to let Bing Qingzi go just like that. Originally, they wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. However, it wasn't a good time to do so. Once they started fighting, Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho wouldn't just sit back and watch. Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho's expressions were a little awkward. The former smiled and said, "Brother Bing, don't misunderstand. Since the matter has been clarified, it's naturally fine. I hope Brother Bing won't take it to heart and understand." The change was really fast. However, the three of them were originally in a group of benefits. As long as there weren't any other benefits that could split the three of them, the past would naturally be the past. After all, they still had to deal with each other in the future. They were all experienced people and wouldn't be swayed by their emotions. They only knew what was true. "Humph." Bing Qingzi coldly snorted and said, "Let's go." Under everyone's gaze, the master and disciples rode on the snow flood dragon and soared into the sky. "Brother Bing, have a safe journey." Yin Baikong and Hu Changsho cupped their hands and sent them off. The group of gathered experts looked down again. They didn't know where their anger came from. Yin Baikong pointed down and stared at Sikong Ju as he shouted, "What exactly is going on? Yan Juexing and the others have already escaped. Why are you all still fighting here?" Sweat appeared on Sikong Ju's forehead. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He turned around and called Zhang Zuanxing, who was also battered and exhausted, to question him. The lords of various countries also gathered their subordinates to reprimand them, asking them what exactly was going on. In the end, after a long discussion, one of them said that he saw someone fighting and went to help, while the other said that he saw someone fighting and went to help. They didn't know what they were fighting for. Only in the end did they understand. The main culprit was Bing Qingzi's disciple. Because he released the sky-shaking arrow to lure the enemies, a group of people swarmed over and messed up the plan. This made the lords of various countries unbearably angry. This matter definitely couldn't be blamed on Bing Qingzi's disciple. He didn't do anything to provoke him. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for being blind. As a result, they all started scolding him. The lords of various countries had a belly full of anger. Before they even returned to their own territories, some of them were already furious. Hero had looted 90 spirit stone mines in half a day. At the same time, he had committed crimes in 90 different countries. Every country was shocked. Hero had obviously taken advantage of the time when the country's defenses were at their weakest. However, Hero didn't go too far this time. He only killed people and didn't blow up the mines. However, the number of cultivators killed in 90 mines added up to a terrifying number. Although most of them were low-level cultivators, there were more than 20,000 cultivators. On average, there were 200 to 300 people killed in each mine. Not a single one survived. This was a shocking massacre. He had killed more than 20,000 cultivators. The entire cultivation world was a little dumbfounded. This hero was too ruthless. How could he do it with so many people? As a result, they all condemned Hero. What made all the countries palpitate was that 90 different locations were attacked at the same time. How many people did he use? When did such a huge force hide in the cultivation world, and no one knew about it? The unknown was the scariest, and the unknown intentions were the scariest. For a moment, all the countries felt insecure. When talking about Hero, their expressions changed. They all mobilized people to protect the important locations, afraid that Hero would come to them again. The cultivation world, which had been a little restless recently, suddenly became much quieter. Currently, many people in the cultivation world were very depressed. Yu Qianqiu was one of them. After receiving the news that Yan Juexing was safe and sound, he was extremely depressed. He didn't expect that Yan Juexing would still escape even after being forced to such a state. Didn't this mean that Yan Juexing was indeed a character from another angle? On a flying magical artifact, Yulan was controlling it. The wind and clouds brushed past the ship's side, quickly flying over thousands of mountains and rivers. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting at the back, suddenly sighed. Scourge! Scourge! He felt that the harder it was to kill Yan Juexing, the more powerful he was. If he was left alive, he would definitely be a scourge in the future. He didn't know what logic was behind this. Senior, who are you calling scourge? Guan Zhongkai asked expressionlessly. After knowing that Yan Juexing was fine, he was also in a bad mood. He had already been scolded by Si Kongju, who said that he would deal with him when he returned. Since even his grandmaster had confirmed that Yan Juexing was fine, it was most likely that Niu Yud was lying. This time, he had really caused his own death. However, this fella's cultivation was too high. Putting aside the fact that he couldn't beat him, he didn't even dare to scold him. He didn't even dare to show his face. Yulan, who was controlling the flying magical artifact, didn't look any better. His master, Shangguan Taiping, even had the heart to kill him, who asked him to lie about military intelligence, causing his master to offend a large group of people. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, then sighed. Nothing, I was talking about the hero. This hero is really a scourge. He actually killed so many people. Sigh. Scourge. These 2 days he had heard many people talking about the hero. Then where does Senior think the hero came from? Guan Zhongkai said perfunctorily. You're asking me? Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose, then suddenly chuckled. If you ask me, other than your World Commerce Association, I really can't think of anyone else with this ability. Think about it. The hero obviously took advantage of the moment when the country's defenses were at their weakest. Such a large-scale attack, it was obvious that they were prepared. And regarding Yan Juexing's matter, your World Commerce Association was the first to know, right? You also had the best chance to set it up in advance, right? Plus, World Commerce Association has so many people and that kind of ability. So this so-called hero is actually most likely your World Chamber of Commerce. Chapter 590. Senior's joke is too big. Guan Zhongkai's tone was not very confident, and his eyes were slightly dazed. Hearing Niu Yud's words, he thought of something. As the third-generation head disciple of the World Commerce Association, he knew that the World Commerce Association was not as simple as it looked on the surface. Even though he was not deeply involved in some things, he still felt that something was wrong. Grandmaster Yin Baikong, other than having many wives and children, he also had many disciples. Who in the cultivation world didn't know that Grandmaster was very good at teaching disciples? He had taught 2 soul formation disciples, and there were at least 100 tribulation passing experts. He didn't even know how many martial uncles he had. This was also one of the main reasons why the World Commerce Association was so powerful in the cultivation world. In the eyes of outsiders, these martial uncles were the backbone of the World Commerce Association's headquarters. They were always stationed in the treasure bowl, and Grandmaster Yin Baikong rarely used them. But he unintentionally discovered that these martial uncles seemed to be doing something in the dark. There was once when he went to ask his master, but was reprimanded by his master, telling him not to worry so much and to do his own thing. Guan Zhongkai had always had doubts in his heart, but hearing Niu Yud's words, he was suddenly enlightened. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. Could it be that hero was really a force of the World Commerce Association? Yu Qianqiu's eyelids twitched when he saw his appearance. He glanced at Yulan Do, who seemed to be listening attentively, and his lips curled into a smile. Then he poked his head out and said patiently, I'm right. Did you remember something? Ah. Guan Zhongkai came back to his senses and repeatedly denied. Senior, you can't say such things. Our World Commerce Association is definitely not a hero. Think about it. Our World Commerce Association is also one of the victims this time. A spirit stone mine was also bathed in blood by hero. You can fool others, but you can't fool me. Yu Qianqiu winked and smiled evilly. The reason why Hero looted World Commerce Association's Spirit Stone Mine was to help World Commerce clear of suspicion. Otherwise, others would always suffer, and only your World Commerce Association would be fine. Plus, only World Commerce Association has the ability to do such a big thing. It would be strange if outsiders didn't suspect you. That's why. Your World Chamber of Commerce is very smart and ruthless. In order to deceive people, they killed their own people to divert everyone's suspicion. The more Yu Qianqiu spoke, the more reasonable it became. Even the fake became the truth in his words. This gave Guan Zhongkai a fright. In particular, when he subconsciously turned his head to look at Yulan Du in front of him, he saw that Niu Yud was listening attentively to their conversation. This caused Guan Zhongkai to groan incessantly. He wanted nothing more than to stuff Niu Yid's mouth with something. He could only blame himself for having nothing better to do. Of all the things he could have asked, he had to ask this question. If word of this got out, the World Commerce Association would immediately become the target of public criticism. At that time, Master would definitely skin him alive. Absolutely impossible. Senior might not know this, but back then, the first person Hero kidnapped was my Grandmaster's grandson. This matter was known by the entire cultivation world. This robbery of the Spirit Stone Mine is the second time they have targeted our world commerce. If our world commerce is a hero, we can't always target ourselves. Guan Zhongkai couldn't wait to clear his name. Since the journey is boring, Laozi will play with you. Yu Qianqiu sneered and lazily leaned on the back of the boat, saying, Don't argue, some things can't withstand scrutiny. Let me ask you, why did Hero kidnap someone from your World Commerce Association the first time he appeared and not someone else? Did they want to show that they had nothing to do with World Commerce Association the moment they appeared? Also, why did the hero only harm others once, but only your World Commerce Company twice? Little did they know, the more someone tries to clear their name, the more suspicious that person is. Guan Zhongkai's forehead was covered in sweat from his words. He looked at Yulan Du in front of him from time to time and said with a bitter smile, Senior, Hero really has nothing to do with our World Commerce Association. I said don't argue with me. Yu Qianqiu crossed his legs and said, If you continue to argue, do you believe that I can even deduce the reason and motive behind your actions? Guan Zhongkai was truly speechless. If he didn't continue to argue, did he have to admit the truth? After thinking about it, he decided not to say it. If he continued, he would definitely get sick from fright. He immediately changed the topic. Senior, let's get down to business. Last time you said that Yin Zhuixing had exceptional martial arts, but after my grandmaster and the others investigated, it was completely false. We're about to reach World Commerce Association. Have you thought about how to explain it to my grandmaster? Actually, Guan Zhongkai had always been puzzled. The matter had been exposed, proving that Niu Yid was lying, but why did Niu Yid still look as if nothing had happened? Was he not afraid at all? Investigation. Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. Only found a false result? Your Grandmaster Yin Baikong's foresight is very suspicious. Let Yin Zhuixing try in front of me, Others might not know, but do you think you don't? Did you forget the scene of Yin Zhuixing fleeing after being exposed by me that day? With this said, Guan Zhongkai recalled the scene of Yin Zhuixing and the others leaving that day. It was indeed very suspicious. He couldn't help but nod. I'm afraid you'll have to personally explain this matter to my grandmaster. We won't be able to explain it clearly. Explain my ass, it's up to him whether he believes it or not. I didn't ask him to chase after Yin Zhuixing, it's none of my business. Yu Qianqiu sneered. So what if I don't explain? What can your grandmaster do to me? Crazy. Guan Zhongkai was stunned. He was still hoping to bring him to the headquarters and let him explain to grandmaster himself. If he explained clearly, he would feel better. But from his tone, he actually wanted to play hard on grandmaster. If he angered grandmaster, then wouldn't it be a great sin for him as the person who brought him here? Endless towering mountains and precipitous ridges, a primordial forest left from ancient times. Under the endless greenery was eerie and terrifying. The forest was densely covered with wisteria, and all kinds of ferocious beasts frequently appeared, letting out fierce roars. This was within the borders of the Tuan nation, where the World Commerce Association was located. Yu Qianqiu lay on the side of the flying artifact, looking at the retreating mountain scenery below. Only cultivators would settle down and live in such a dangerous place. If it was immortal, it would probably be very difficult to go deep. He played with a pile of silver balls in his hands, and occasionally threw one down, as if he was shooting birds. The other two felt their teeth ache watching. The mountain terrain in front suddenly became dangerous, and there were occasional mountain peaks that rose abruptly. Yu Qianqiu walked to the front of the flying artifact, and saw clouds and mist swirling in the distance. There was a tall mountain standing in the clouds and mist. Although it wasn't very tall, its altitude was obviously higher than the surrounding mountains. In the midst of being ethereal, It had a bit of a fairyland feeling. Yu Qianqiu raised his chin and asked, "That should be the god of wealth peak, right?" Guan Zhongkai, who had switched hands to control the flying artifact, replied, "That's right. The place protected by the clouds and mist is the cornucopia, and that highest peak is the World Commerce Association's headquarters, the god of wealth peak's core area." Saying this, he shook his head with a bitter smile. "Speaking of which, it's all thanks to Senior. We can directly land on the god of wealth peak, and don't need to enter from the entrance. In all these years, this is the first time I have the right to directly descend upon the god of wealth peak." Yu Qianqiu folded his arms and rubbed his chin. "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Entering from the entrance, I want to see what the world-renowned cornucopia looks like." Guan Zhongkai nodded and didn't say much. In reality, he was also a little apprehensive because he had made a mistake and didn't dare to see his grandmaster. If he could delay it, it would be good to see him later. Very soon, the flying artifact landed at the foot of the mountain between two peaks. These two mountains weren't tall, but they looked quite strange. They were like twins, almost identical in appearance. Standing at the edge of the clouds and mist, they were like two guards standing there silently, adding a bit of mystery to this place. Guan Zhongkai put away the flying artifact and said to Yu Qianqiu, who was looking around, "Senior, please follow me." Yu Qianqiu nodded and followed the two people in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. After going deep into the clouds and mist, he realized that this fog was really not ordinary thick. With his cultivation, his visibility was at most 3 meters. After walking between the two mountains, he realized that there was actually a cliff in front of him. A chain bridge extended from the clouds and mist to the side of the cliff. Judging from the direction of the thick main chain that was pulling the suspension bridge, the fixed place should be between the two mountains. Walking on the bridge, Yu Qianqiu didn't understand. "What's the meaning of this? Can't we just fly over directly? Why do we need to make a suspension bridge?" Guan Zhongkai walked as he turned back and explained. "Senior, you may not know this, but because this is where our sect's headquarters is located, the security here is very tight. This cloud and mist isn't an ordinary defensive formation. It's an extremely powerful killing formation. The only way for outsiders to enter and exit this place is this suspension bridge. When crossing this bridge, if anyone leaves the vicinity of this bridge, they will immediately be sucked into this killing formation. Of course, people with the sect's permission will open other paths to enter and exit." Yu Landu also turned back and said, "Also, this path can be sealed at any time." Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and said, "This defense is indeed quite tight. It's very hard for people who want to go in and cause trouble to break in. It's even harder for people who want to come out after causing trouble to escape. That's natural. The World Commerce Association has always done its best to provide the safest trading ground for cultivators in the world," Guan Zhongkai said rather proudly. The three of them walked for nearly 200 meters before reaching the end of this bridge. In front of them was a cave. On both sides of the cave, there were two large tiger heads peeking out. They were very lifelike and looked like they were made of black iron. The two main chains of the suspension bridge were spat out from the tiger's mouth. It was very mighty and extraordinary. Chapter 591. As expected of the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce, even the gatekeepers were at least at the tribulation passing stage. Yu Qianqiu was secretly awed. Guan Zhongkai cupped his hands in greeting and greeted, "Martial uncle." Yulan followed suit and cupped her hands in greeting. A man walked out from each of the two stone chambers and nodded at Yulan. His gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly introduced, "This is Niu Yud, Senior Niu. He's someone Grandmaster wishes to see. This disciple has been ordered to lead the way." "So it's Mr. Niu." One of the men cupped his hands in a more amiable manner. Yu Qianqiu nodded in acknowledgement. The other man had a taut face and a serious expression. He frowned and asked, "Guan Zhongkai, since you're honorable master's guest, why are you walking here?" Guan Zhongkai replied, "Senior Niu wishes to see the scenery of Cornucopia and specifically requested to enter from here." The man replied, "Mr. Niu, to enter from here, you need a jade archive as a guide. Do you have one on you? Yu Qianqiu could hear a hint of displeasure in his tone. He thought to himself, did I offend you? He calmly shook his head and said, no. Then there's no other way. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to turn back and enter through a special passage. The rules here cannot be broken, the man said expressionlessly. Guan Zhongkai was stunned. Yulan also looked left and right in astonishment. The other man with a more amiable expression said in a low voice, Junior Marshal brother, don't be rash. This is Honorable Master's guest. He cupped his hands in greeting and smiled at Yu Qianqiu. Mister, please don't be offended. My junior marshal brother has always been like this. Please follow me and apply for a Jade Archive. After that, you'll be able to enter and exit freely. So it's possible to apply for a Jade Archive. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He stared at the unfriendly man and asked softly, so you're saying that you're deliberately making things difficult for me by asking me to turn back? Guan Zhongkai was shocked. He had personally experienced Niu Yud's prowess. Moreover, Niu Yud had a bad temper. Even his master couldn't handle him. Immediately he bowed repeatedly and said, Senior, please calm down, calm down. Even Yulan took a step back, her eyes darting around as if she was ready to watch a good show. The person with the amiable expression also came out to smooth things over. It's just a small matter, don't take it to heart, don't take it to heart. Junior brother, hurry up and apologize to Mr. Who would have thought that the man would say with a cold face, apologize? I didn't say anything wrong. Without the Jade Archive as a guide, we can't enter from here. Not to mention, I didn't stop him from applying for the Jade Archive. All right. Yu Qianqiu put on a fake smile and said, you've got guts to provoke me. You must be tired of living. As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic, cold, and terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body, instantly filling the entire passageway. Senior, please calm down. Guan Zhongkai said in a panic, but just as he said that, the rest of the words in his mouth were forced back by that extremely terrifying aura, and his entire body began to tremble. He thought to himself, it's over. The temperature in the cave instantly dropped below freezing point. Coupled with the bone-chilling aura, everyone was implicated. Even the people in the stone chambers on both sides were no exception. Everyone's teeth were chattering. The person with the amiable expression was terrified. He slowly raised his hand and said, Senior. He realized that it was extremely difficult for him to speak. The person with the unkind tone was in trouble. Yu Qianqiu mobilized the terrifying aura of the black flame, and didn't hesitate to heavily punish him. This caused him to roll his eyes continuously. After swaying for a while, he couldn't take it anymore and fell to the ground with a plop. He didn't wake up, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, seeing that we might become family in the future, I'll spare your life. If there's a next time, I'll kill you without mercy. Even if Yin Baikong comes, he won't be able to protect you. The terrifying aura in the cave quickly disappeared with his last words and returned to normal. But the others still felt their bodies stiffen. They couldn't recover for a while, and they all looked at Niu Yud in fear. Guan Zhongkai looked at the unconscious martial uncle on the ground, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, why did you have to do this? You even dragged the others into this. Yulan Du was even more shocked when he activated his internal energy to dispel the terrifying aura that had seeped into his body. He knew that Niu Yud was powerful, but he had never experienced it himself. He didn't expect him to be this powerful. He didn't even need to lift a finger to deal with an expert at the end of the crossing calamity stage. Just that terrifying aura alone was enough to deal with him. He had to inform Master of this as soon as possible. The group of people gradually regained their mobility. The first thing the amiable person did was to squat down to check on his junior. He was relieved to find that he was still alive but unconscious. He waved his hand and summoned 2 people from the stone chamber to carry his junior away. Then he cupped his fists and apologized. Thank you for your mercy, Senior. Please follow me to complete the Jade Archive. He knew that the person in front of him wasn't someone he could afford to offend. Yu Qianqiu followed him expressionlessly. That person personally took out a Jade Archive, and asked Yu Qianqiu to imbue a strand of true origin into it. Then he immediately inscribed a set of incantations into the jade archive. Soon, the incantations were completed and handed to Yu Qianqiu. How many spirit stones do you need? Yu Qianqiu waved the jade archive in his hand. That person waved his hand and said, "Senior is my master's honored guest. How could I dare to accept your spirit stones?" Then he gave Guan Zhongkai a look. Guan Zhongkai understood and hurried over to invite Yu Qianqiu to leave. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to waste his time here, and left with the two of them. That person remained behind Miao Yi and bowed, saying, "Farewell, senior." Then he smiled bitterly and shook his head, slowly letting out a sigh. He thought to himself, "I've finally sent this terrifying guy away. How terrifying." With his hands behind his back, Yu Qianqiu walked forward. The people standing in the passageway hurriedly made way for the three of them. They all stood on either side of him and looked at him with reverence. These people were cultivators from various places who had to pass through the passageway. They didn't expect to bump into the famous Niu Yud here. Not to mention, they even got to watch the show. However, the aura that filled the cave just now was too terrifying. Even now, everyone still hadn't fully recovered from it. After walking for a short distance, they discovered a profound light screen blocking their path. The color of the light screen was almost exactly the same as the luster of the fluorite. If they weren't careful, they would definitely bump into it. The three of them took out their jade archives and imbued their true origin into it. A ray of white light struck the light screen, and 3 holes just wide enough for 3 people to pass through appeared. After the 3 of them passed through, the light screen quickly closed up again. Such a profound wave light screen, in the short passage of nearly 100 meters, actually had 3 obstructions. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sigh at the tight security of the World Chamber of Commerce. If someone caused trouble and wanted to escape, even if they could break through these 3 light screens, it would still take them some time. Similarly, people who tried to barge in from the outside would face the same problem. Meanwhile, the World Chamber of Commerce would have enough time to react and respond. Once they exited the cave, their eyes suddenly lit up. A bustling city was right in front of them. It was built in a basin surrounded by mountains. It was hard to imagine that such a bustling city could actually exist in such a desolate and uninhabited primeval forest. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. This was a cornucopia. It really did look like a basin. It was far bigger than the 100 Flowers Valley, and far more lively than the 100 Flowers Valley. Although it wasn't as big as the capitals of the various countries that Yu Qianqiu had been to, the various buildings here were all exquisite. They couldn't be compared to the ordinary commoners' buildings in the secular world. Thinking about it, it made sense. Most of the buildings here were representatives of the various powers of the cultivation world. How could the secular world compare? The most conspicuous was the cone-shaped towering mountain in the middle of the buildings. The cultivation world's famous god of wealth peak stood in the center of the cornucopia, the core of the World Chamber of Commerce. All sorts of buildings surrounded the foot of the mountain, spreading out in a circular pattern. Guan Zhongkai saw the astonishment in Yu Qianqiu's eyes and was somewhat pleased. He smiled and said, "Senior, this is our World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters. Please." He pointed to the steps beneath his feet and made an inviting gesture. Yu Qianqiu nodded and the 3 of them followed the steps into the basin. Stepping into the bustling city, people came and went. It felt like the streets of the secular world. If they didn't know that this was the cultivation world's famous World Chamber of Commerce, who would have believed that they were currently in an important area of the cultivation world? On both sides of the street, there were pavilions with green tiles and vermilion eaves. Wine shops and commercial buildings could be found everywhere. There were even some places where new buildings were being built. As Yu Qianqiu looked left and right, he couldn't help but sigh that Yin Baikong was indeed a talent for business. He managed to manage such a remote place into such a prosperous place. On the way, they saw people constantly greeting Guan Zhongkai and Yulan. However, when they saw the 2 of them respectfully accompanying a middle-aged man, they couldn't help but look at him in astonishment. They felt that he looked a little unfamiliar. But then they remembered that the 2 of them had been accompanying a certain person in the cultivation world during this period of time. Their expressions changed slightly as they remembered who that person was. Not long after, The news that Niu Yid had arrived at the World Chamber of Commerce spread through the entire cornucopia at lightning speed. Dormant Spring. Yu Qianqiu stared at the signboard of a building and read it out loud. Then he looked at the dozen or so gorgeously dressed women downstairs. These women were basically all at the foundation establishment stage. They constantly tugged at the male cultivators passing by on the street. Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth, thinking that he was seeing things. He asked the two of them blankly, "What are they doing?" "Soliciting customers," Yulan said disapprovingly. Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief, "Could this be a brothel? There are brothels in the cultivation world? Do cultivators do this? Are they being forced?" When he said this, his expression didn't look too good. Guan Zhongkai explained, "No one is forcing them, they're all voluntary. Some itinerant cultivators don't have a source of spirit stones and want to continue cultivating in the cultivation world, so there are many who do this. After they save up enough spirit stones, they'll concentrate on cultivating. When they run out of spirit stones, they might come out and continue doing this. Of course, this place isn't like the brothels in the secular world. They won't restrict personal freedom. Here, the brothel keeper takes a cut. If you want to do it, you can come and go. It's very convenient." Chapter 592. Very convenient. Yu Qianqiu's expression was lifeless. He really didn't expect that these immortals in the eyes of the secular world would actually be in this line of work. He subconsciously couldn't accept it. He shook his head helplessly and said, "They're all quite good-looking. Of all the things they could do, why did they have to be in this line of work?" Yulan looked at him with a somewhat strange expression. It was the kind of expression that seemed to say that he didn't understand the suffering of the world. She smiled and said, "Senior's cultivation is profound. I'm afraid you rarely come into contact with low-level cultivators, especially those itinerant cultivators. They'll do anything for spirit stones." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "Who said that? I've come into contact with many itinerant cultivators in Ghost Manor, but I've never heard of cultivators in this line of work." Yulan smiled and said, "Who would go around talking about it after doing this line of work? It's only made public in cornucopia. In fact, there are many itinerant cultivators out there who do wild work, but it's not safe. They often put in the effort, but don't get anything in return. They might even get themselves killed." "That's right." Guan Zhongkai nodded and said, "It's different here. As long as they pay taxes, they'll receive the protection of world commerce. They'll get something in return if they put in the effort." "Are these people all itinerant cultivators?" Yu Qianqiu asked as he stared at Spring Slumber. "Of course. Cultivators with sex all have a source of spirit stones. Who would do this?" Yulan said. When I was in Ghost Manor, I heard that there are many female itinerant cultivators who marry into sex. Those male itinerant cultivators can't even find a partner for dual cultivation. Why don't they find a sex disciple to marry?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and smiled. The latter said disdainfully, "There are female itinerant cultivators who marry into sex, but they're very few. How many of these female itinerant cultivators who have been fooling around outside for so long are still virgins? In order to survive, who knows how many people they've dual cultivated with? Most of the sex disciples are just playing around. It's not easy to marry them. It's already not easy to get past the elders of the sect. Which sect would accept prostitutes? Wouldn't we become a laughingstock if word got out?" Guan Zhongkai nodded in agreement and said, "If he really is a talented loose cultivator, the various sects will fight to recruit him. However, there are very few who marry into the sect. What Senior has heard are all rumors and cannot be trusted. Actually, the situation of female loose cultivators is even worse than that of male loose cultivators. However, they are also more vain. They do things that they have to swallow and pretend that they are living a good life." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Thinking about it, this era was different from his previous world. It was extremely feudal. Most of the legitimate marriages were first-hand goods. It was difficult to find a legitimate husband for second-hand goods and above. Besides, When he was doing well in his previous life, he seemed to have quite a number of subordinates who were in this line of work. Didn't he turn a blind eye to it? There was no reason for him to come here and have such a messy sympathy for others. The three of them had been standing there for a long time. Because of Guan Zhongkai, they had already alerted the brothel keeper inside. He saw a graceful and beautiful young woman swaying her hips as she walked out. She waved her hand from afar and shouted, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Master Guan. You haven't been here for a long time." Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan Zhongkai suspiciously. It seemed that this guy was a regular here. Yulan Do had a calm expression as if this was normal. The young woman tried to drag Guan Zhongkai inside. Guan Zhongkai laughed and pushed her away, saying, "I still have something to do today. Don't mess around." "Master Yu, are you busy?" The young woman stayed by Yulan Do's side again. Yulan Do also said that he had something to do and pushed her away. In the end, the young woman stared at Yu Qianqiu again. She smiled coquettishly and said, "I haven't seen this master before. Why don't you two introduce him to this servant?" Although Yu Qianqiu didn't like this, he was happy to deal with such a knowledgeable person. He wanted to tease her a little. Suddenly he heard a quarrel in Spring Slumber Loft. There were also faint sounds of fighting. The young woman's expression changed. She apologized to them and hurried back. Yulando laughed and said, "Someone is making trouble in Cornucopia. I wonder which family's young master is it." Guan Zhongkai's expression turned a little ugly. After a while, they saw three people pulling a woman out. The woman struggled with all her might and kept shouting, "Let me go." A group of Orioles came out of Spring Slumber Loft and seemed to be watching the show. Looking at the scene, it didn't seem like someone was making trouble. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. They didn't understand. Yu Qianqiu felt that the three men were familiar. He seemed to have seen them somewhere. Someone was making trouble in Cornucopia. This was something new. Many people immediately rushed over to watch the show. At this time, the Orioles in Spring Slumber Loft opened a path. The beautiful young woman came out and indifferently walked in front of them. She said, "I don't care what relationship you have. If you want to leave or stay, my Spring Slumber Loft can't stop the three of you. But the expenses of the three of you can't be less than 1 spirit stone. Also, you have to pay for everything broken inside. Otherwise, don't blame me for reporting you to the World Chamber of Commerce." Hearing the words World Chamber of Commerce, the three men seemed to remember where they were and subconsciously let go. The woman who was dragged out quickly walked to the young woman's side and stared at one of the men. "I have nothing to do with you. Don't come looking for me again." The man clenched his fists and said, "Didn't you say that the Blue Palace disciple wanted to marry you? Why did he come here to do this?" He raised his hand and pointed at Spring Slumber Loft's signboard. There's no good man," the woman said disdainfully. "I said I have nothing to do with you. It's none of your business whether I do this or not. You have a good way out. I can't stop you. That's why I let you go. But if I knew you were here for this, I wouldn't have let you go." The man shouted, "Where's that man? Where is he? Didn't he say he would take you to Blue Palace? Why did he let you do this?" The woman giggled as if she had heard a funny joke. She shook her head and said, "He's a Blue Palace disciple. Of course he's in Blue Palace. So what if I tell you? What can the three of you do to a Blue Palace disciple?" Hearing this, the people around them had a rough idea of what was going on. There was a flurry of discussion. The general gist of it was that the two of them used to be a couple. Later, a Blue Palace disciple took a fancy to the woman and took her away. The Blue Palace disciple was probably just fooling around. When he got bored, he dumped the woman. In the end, the woman fell into this line of work. Yu Qianqiu knew of the Blue Palace. It seemed to be the territory of Pei Feng, the man whose hand Wen Lanfeng had cut off. "Don't let me run into him, or I'll kill him," the man said fiercely. "Haha, how arrogant." Someone in the crowd sneered. The person who spoke happened to be standing next to Yu Qianqiu. He walked up to the three people and said indifferently, "I'm Lu Feng, and I happen to be a disciple of the Blue Palace." "What did you just say? You want to kill a Blue Palace disciple? Say it again for me to hear." The three people turned around and stared at the person in front of them. They were so angry that their faces were red and their bodies trembled, but they didn't dare to say anything. There was a burst of laughter. They were laughing at the three people for overestimating themselves and talking big. Didn't they know that this was the World Chamber of Commerce? Did the Blue Palace also have business here? Yu Qianqiu slowly folded his arms. When he saw the faces of the three people, he remembered where he had seen them before. It was in Ghost Manor that he had talked back to Fang Ming. This protagonist who was so embarrassed that he couldn't show his face was called Tianyi. He looked at them. Tianyi was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, and the two beside him were also in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. However, compared to Lu Feng, who was in the early stage of the tribulation passing realm, they were still a bit weaker. In addition, they were from the Blue Palace, so there must be more than one person here. If they fought, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and sighed. Seeing that the three people didn't dare to speak, Lu Feng was even more pleased. He pointed at the woman and said, "Isn't she just a wandering cultivator? My Blue Palace disciple is giving her face by messing with her." "What? You three are not convinced?" His words made the group burst into laughter again. The beautiful woman's expression changed. She bit her lip and didn't say anything. The disciples of the top 10 cultivators were so powerful that she couldn't afford to offend them. The muscles on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He thought to himself, "Damn it. I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen such a despicable person. Even I don't dare to be so despicable. How dare she steal my limelight? I really can't stand it anymore. If I watch too much, I'll lose my appetite and lose face as a man. I'm a man, so I can't just stand by and watch." Yu Qianqiu nudged Yulan and Guan Zhongkai who were in front of him. The two didn't know what he was going to do, but they still moved aside. He walked out expressionlessly and stood quietly behind Lu Feng. Everyone's eyes were on him. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and felt that something was wrong. Amano and the other two looked over and were stunned. They had seen Niu Yud at Ghost Manor, so they naturally knew him, but they didn't expect to see him here. Seeing that everyone was looking over, Lu Feng thought that they were looking at him. He continued to be arrogant and proud. He pointed at Amano and the other two and said, "How dare you say that you want to kill the Blue Palace disciple in public? I think you must be tired of living." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly felt someone pat his shoulder from behind. As soon as he turned his head, his vision blurred. Then he heard a paw sound. His eardrums buzzed, and he felt a burning pain on his face. It was so painful that it was a little numb. Lu Feng staggered a few steps and shook his head to see clearly who had hit him. It was a middle-aged man with a smile on his face. He subconsciously asked, "Who are you?" Then he remembered that he had been hit in public. He immediately shouted angrily, "You're courting death." Without another word, a blue flying knife flashed out of his pocket and directly shot towards the other party. Yu Qianqiu still looked at him with a smile on his face. The flying knife flew towards his chest, but he didn't dodge it. He just lightly flicked his finger at it. His movement was so casual that it was like he was chasing away a fly. With a clear ding sound, the blue knife paused in the air for a moment. Then, like a deflated balloon, it turned into sparkling blue powder and drifted to the ground. Chapter 593. Silence. It was really quiet. Everyone present was stunned. Those who were happily watching the show all opened their mouths wide. Lu Maple was even more dumbfounded. The magic artifact he used to attack his opponent had been turned into powder with a flick of his finger. Heavens! Who on earth was this guy? Just how high was his cultivation? He could actually shatter the magic artifact of the Blue Palace into powder with a flick of his finger. Isn't he a little too powerful? He was unbelievably strong. The chattering girls in the dormant spring house were as shocked as a flock of little quails. They had to sell themselves here because their cultivation was not high. They had never seen such a high level of skill. The eyes of the lady boss, who was as beautiful as a flower and had a graceful bearing, shone brightly. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and saw the lingering fear in each other's eyes. Previously, they felt that the terrifying aura that Niu Yud used to suppress people was a bit unorthodox. It was too different from the aura emitted by most masters. Perhaps there was still a gap between his real cultivation and that of the top 10 masters. But this flick of his finger could be said to have shocked them in a dignified manner. He had shattered the magic artifact of the Blue Palace into powder. This was not something that could be achieved by opportunistic means. This was the real deal. There was no earth-shattering aura, nor was there any frightening noise. There was only a soft ding. It was hard to imagine how much power was contained in this flick of his finger. This level of cultivation had probably reached the legendary return to simplicity stage. They believed that with the cultivation of the top 10 masters, they could also shatter the magic artifact in Lu Maple's hand. But to shatter it into powder, the two of them couldn't help but wonder if the top 10 masters could do it. They had heard that Niu Yud had shown this skill in the ghost manor before, but the concept of shattering it was only limited to shattering it. It was not as terrifying as what they saw now. Too strong. The two of them looked at Niu Yud with more and more awe. This person was definitely a real top master. He is Niu Yud, someone in the crowd said weakly. Ah, he is the ruthless Judge Niu Yud? Many people couldn't help but exclaim. Nowadays, who hadn't heard of the ruthless Judge Niu Yud? This name was very famous in the cultivation world. Recently, the cultivation world was not at peace. It could be said that he was an extremely daring person. He even dared to swindle the spirit stones of the top 10 experts. It was said that he was a person who killed people without blinking an eye. The people who had formed a circle to watch the show subconsciously squeezed back. It was not a good thing to be too close to this guy. You are Niu Yud, Senior Niu? Blue Maple's earlier arrogance had completely vanished, and he didn't dare to make the first move like he did earlier. Even though he had been beaten, his tone became a little more respectful. At this moment, what he was most worried about was whether Niu Yud would still make a move. Sigh. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand dismissively and said, "Compared to your Blue Palace, this little bit of fame is not worth mentioning." Someone in the crowd snickered. What did he mean by saying that a little fame was not worth mentioning in front of the Blue Palace? You dared to beat up someone from the Blue Palace in front of everyone, and you still said it so modestly? Even the beautiful lady boss couldn't help but smile when she heard this. She stared at Yu Qianqiu with interest. Guan Zhongkai, on the other hand, openly smiled. Pei Fong had always been a sworn enemy of Grandmaster Yin Baikong. However, the World Chamber of Commerce did business with the people of the world, and their reputation was their priority. It was not good to find fault with them in cornucopia. Now that Niu Yud had made a move, it couldn't be any better. This guy was famous for being reckless. Others might be afraid of Fatty Pei, but he probably wouldn't be afraid. The truth had already been proven. The World Chamber of Commerce's law enforcement guards quickly swept over from the street. Guan Zhongkai flashed out and blocked their way. No one knew what he said to them, but they looked at each other and smiled. They all stood on the rooftops to watch the show, deciding not to enforce the law for the time being. Blue Maple saw the crowd's mocking eyes and immediately blushed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior, you are a contemporary expert. Why are you deliberately making things difficult for me?" Fuck. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disdainfully and said, "You already said that I am a contemporary expert. Do you think I would deliberately make things difficult for you?" The crowd snickered again. They found that Niu Yud's words were a bit shameless. He really didn't have the demeanor of an expert. But when they thought about it, demeanor didn't seem to have anything to do with Niu Yud. Then why did Senior hit me? Blue Maple's tone became a bit tougher. After all, it was under the watchful eyes of the public. If he continued to weaken the Blue Palace's reputation, he was afraid that he wouldn't end up well when he returned. Yu Qianqiu said, "There's no other reason. I just couldn't help but want to slap you when I saw your cheap mouth. What do you have to say about that?" The crowd roared with laughter. Blue Maple immediately trembled with anger and said sternly, "Niu Yud, don't go too far. Do you really think that the disciples of the Blue Palace are so easy to bully?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "That's right. It's precisely because the disciples of the Blue Palace are not easy to bully that the female loose cultivators in the cultivation world suffer when they meet you. How dare you say that you're giving them face by playing with them in public? You're really shameless. You're a disgrace to all men. Damn it. If you want to play with them, then so be it. No one can control you. Why do you have to make it sound so disgusting and even show off? If I don't slap you, I can't eat or sleep well. I came here because I heard about your reputation. I want to see how easy it is to bully the disciples of the Blue Palace. His words. The group of women in the sleeping spring house were all heaving up and down. They seemed to be a little excited. The graceful lady boss stared at him silently, unblinking. You really want to openly provoke the Blue Palace? Blue Maple had no choice but to use the name of the Blue Palace to pressure him again, hoping that the other party would back down. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and turned to stare at Amano and the others. He said, Amano. Amano greets Senior Neo. Amano hurriedly came over and bowed. He seemed a little excited. He didn't expect such a person to remember his name. The other two also hurriedly came over and bowed. There was a soft murmur in the surroundings. From the way Niu Yud addressed them, it seemed that he knew these three people. The beautiful lady boss's eyes dimmed slightly. She thought that Niu Yud was standing up for the female cultivator who had been humiliated, but it turned out that he was doing it for these three people. The woman in pink next to her was the heroine of this matter. Her eyes lit up. It seemed that she didn't expect the three of them to know someone like Niu Yud. The expression on her face kept changing. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said, I didn't expect to see the three of you here after we parted ways at the Ghost Manor. It seems that we're really fated. Yes. The three of them bowed. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Amano, I heard you say that you want to kill the disciples of the Blue Palace. Did I hear you correctly? Yu Qianqiu said as he looked at Blue Maple. Blue Maple's expression changed. He felt that something was wrong. The people around them looked at each other in dismay. They could tell what was going on in his words. Yes. Amano replied, but he seemed a little uneasy. All right, I'll give you a chance. Yu Qianqiu raised his chin at Blue Maple and said, the three of you go and kill him. Blue Maple was shocked and said sternly, Niu Yud, you're openly going against the Blue Palace. My ancestor won't let you go. Then he shouted at Amano and the other two. How dare you? Amano and the other two hesitated. They didn't have the guts to kill the disciples of the Blue Palace. Unless they wanted to die in the future, that would be more likely. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the three of them and said indifferently, Where's the courage to cause trouble in the World Chamber of Commerce? I don't accept cowards as my subordinates. As soon as he said this, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people looked at Amano and the other two enviously. What he meant was that if they killed Blue Maple, they would be his subordinates in the future. The three of them weren't fools. They naturally understood what he meant. As itinerant cultivators, they knew how rare this opportunity was. Even if they had to risk their lives, it would be worth it. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing of Ghost Manor were so glorious after they followed Niu Yud. They could order all the experts in the final stage of the tribulation stage around the world around, which made many itinerant cultivators envious. Something that could only be imagined in their dreams actually happened to them. The three of them looked at each other. They were in high spirits as if they had been injected with chicken blood. If they didn't take this chance, they would be letting themselves down. So they nodded at each other. With flying swords in hand, they dashed forward and immediately surrounded Blue Maple in a triangular formation. Try and touch me if you dare. Blue Maple threatened. A blue saber appeared in his hand again. He looked around as if he didn't want to fight and wanted to escape. Kid, I'm here. If you dare to escape, I promise you'll die a horrible death. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. If you can defeat the three of them, I'll spare your life. If you dare to escape, I'll kill you immediately. Blue Maple's face turned pale. He immediately dismissed the idea of escaping because he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could escape from such a terrifying expert like Niu Yud. As his eyes drifted, he suddenly stopped and saw Guan Zhongkai in the crowd. He immediately said loudly, Senior Guan, our Blue Palace does business in Cornucopia and has paid all the taxes. We should enjoy the protection of the World Chamber of Commerce. Is the World Chamber of Commerce really going to turn a blind eye to it? Where is the credibility of the World Chamber of Commerce? This accusation was too big. Guan Zhongkai's expression changed and he waved to the roof. The law enforcement guards flashed to the middle and surrounded Blue Maple. The latter was slightly relieved. He wasn't afraid of Tianyi and the other two, but Niu Yud. The other side was clearly determined to kill him. If such an expert played any tricks during the fight, he probably wouldn't even know how he died. At this moment, 5 or 6 people in blue clothes appeared out of nowhere and flashed to the scene. They also protected Blue Maple. Blue Maple glanced at them and silently gritted his teeth. He couldn't say anything at this time, but he was well aware that these fellow disciples had been nearby just now. They probably didn't dare to come out when they saw Niu Yud looking for trouble with the Blue Palace. Now that the World Chamber of Commerce's people had stepped forward, they appeared one by one. Chapter 594. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the group from Blue Palace with some disdain. But to the surrounding cultivators, this wasn't a big deal. Avoiding the strong and avoiding the weak was the most basic survival rule in the cultivation world. If they didn't even know how to avoid an expert like Niu Yud and wanted to fight head-on, then everyone would laugh at them for overestimating themselves. Guan Zhongkai walked into the field with a bitter expression and cupped his hands towards Yu Qianqiu. "Senior, please calm down. This is the headquarters of the World Commerce Association after all, and no one is allowed to cause trouble here. Senior, please let them go for the time being on account of my grandmaster. I will give Yin Baikong an explanation. Besides," Yu Qianqiu's eyes turned cold as he swept his gaze across the field and finally landed on Blue Maple's face. He said indifferently, "It's not that the World Commerce Association didn't do their duty, but I stopped them." Blue Maple was shocked. He didn't think that the other party wouldn't even give face to the World Commerce Association. From his tone, he still wanted to kill him. Since that was the case, he had to escape even if he didn't want to. Without another word, he flew up in a flash. Who knew that he would run into a ball of cold air after flying up a few meters? Apart from the bone-piercing chill, there were also all kinds of extreme negative emotions that could frighten one's soul. They easily broke through his stubborn will and directly and intensely crashed into his sea of consciousness. His consciousness sank into a coma in despair. His body stiffened and he fell uncontrollably. Under everyone's gaze, Blue Maple had just flown up when his eyes rolled back, and his limbs fell stiffly to the ground with a plop. No one knew what had happened to him. He looked at Niu Yud again, and felt his hair stand on end. He didn't even know how he had done it. His cultivation was indeed ridiculously high. "You had a chance to live but you didn't want it. I told you not to run in front of me, but you didn't believe me," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently as he stared at Blue Maple on the ground. Actually, his cultivation was about the same as Blue Maple's, but he had expected Blue Maple to run. After all, struggling before death was human instinct. So he had secretly placed a black flame aura on Blue Maple's head in advance just in case. Since his cultivation had reached the tribulation stage, it was not difficult for him to do something like this in a short distance. Unless there was someone with an extremely high cultivation at the scene, under his deliberate suppression, it would be very difficult for an ordinary expert to discover it unless they were personally present. This was because it wasn't something that could be seen just by looking at it. But so what if someone found out? It didn't mean anything. On the other hand, it would be embarrassing if he couldn't make Blue Maple stay. Several Blue Palace disciples were shocked and surrounded Blue Maple. The leader said sternly, "Guan Zhongkai, is this the reputation that your World Chamber of Commerce boasts?" The World Commerce's law enforcement guards all looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what to do. In reality, everyone knew that no matter what rules were in the face of power, they were worthless. Rules would always restrict the majority of ordinary people. For those at the top, there was no restriction at all. Guan Zhongkai said with a bitter face, "Senior, don't make things difficult for our world commerce. I've said it before, it's not that your world commerce isn't doing its duty, it's that I've stopped you." Yu Qianqiu spread his arms and a majestic and terrifying aura quickly surged in all directions. Although everyone present was in broad daylight, they felt as if they had fallen into the netherworld. Each and every one of them was on the verge of collapse. Yu Qianqiu wanted to establish his might now. How could he just sit back and do nothing? If he didn't show some ability, how would he have the qualifications to negotiate with an expert like Yin Baikong? Everyone thought that Yan Zhuixing was lying about the matter. Perhaps Yin Baikong was sharpening his blade right now, so he had to make the other party have some misgivings, or at least make the other party think that they were on the same level. That way, both sides would have the patience to talk properly. Otherwise, if an expert like Yin Baikong were to personally test the waters, it would be guaranteed that there would be one funnel after another, unable to hide from the other party's discerning eyes. At that time, no matter how extravagant your words were, it would all be fake. Strength was the most frightening thing. I believe that Yin Baikong will know everything that happened here. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and looked towards the God of Wealth Peak. At the peak of the God of Wealth Peak, there was a pine tree with a long bluestone platform beside it. A cultivator was lying on it, unconscious. He was the expert who was injured by Yu Qianqiu in the passage, one of Yin Baikong's disciples. Niu Yud, you don't even put me in your eyes. You actually dared to injure this old man's disciple in the treasure bowl. Yin Baikong said hatefully. Even cool breeze and drifting cloud couldn't remove the haze on his face. Sikongju said. According to the disciple who was carried here, it was junior brother who provoked Niu Yud first, but he couldn't withstand Niu Yud's aura, that's why. Yin Baikong was slightly startled. He asked in confusion. How could he not know that Niu Yud's cultivation is higher than his, and still provoked him first? Sikongju said with a guilty conscience. Junior brother's 3 disciples all died in the pursuit of Yan Zhuixing. That's why he didn't show any mercy to Niu Yud. As he said this, Yin Baikong glared at him fiercely. Yin Baikong pressed one hand on the unconscious disciple's chest, and after checking the injury he frowned. He then spread his fingers, and a white mist enveloped the disciple on the bluestone platform. Soon after, a faint gray mist slowly rose from the disciple's body, and gradually formed a thick gray ball in his palm. The white mist disappeared, and Yin Baikong held the gray ball in his palm to examine it. He squinted his eyes and said, "It's actually death qi. This is obviously something that only dead people have. Someone actually emitted an aura of death qi. This is really unheard of. Looks like this Niu Yud is being lenient. Once the life force in his body is completely taken over by the death qi, his life will be gone." With a wave of his hand, the gray ball flew far away, turning into a puff of smoke. Not long after, the cultivator on the bluestone platform slowly woke up. Seeing Yin Baikong standing at the side, he struggled to prop himself up and weakly said, "Master, senior brother." Just as Sikongju supported him, he saw a person flashing down the mountain. The person nodded to Sikongju, then immediately bowed to Yin Baikong and said, "Master, Yu Qianqiu is outside the sleeping spring loft, and had a conflict with the people of Blue Palace. From the looks of it, it's very likely that he wants to kill the people of Blue Palace." The person roughly explained the situation, and Yin Baikong and Sikongju were stunned. The former then waved his hand and said, "Got it, first help your junior brother to rest." After the two left the mountain, Yin Baikong stroked his beard and said in a low voice, "Could it be that this Niu Yud really has such strength, that he doesn't even care about Fatty Pei who is at the late soul formation stage?" In his heart, he also weighed his own strength, and now he was a little worried about the consequences of inviting this Niu Yud. If it was easier to invite a god than to send him away, then it would be terrible. Regarding Yan Zhuixing, he had already temporarily put aside the matter. At this time, the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped a little. Almost at the same time, the master and disciple turned their heads to look down the mountain, and released their divine sense to investigate. They immediately discovered that the deeper their divine sense went, the lower the temperature became. Not only the temperature, but they also felt an indescribable aura that made one's heart palpitate. Yin Baikong was immediately overwhelmed with shock. Sikongju didn't dare to extend his divine sense too far, as it was a little unbearable. He withdrew his divine sense and nodded. "It's Niu Yud, I've experienced it before. This is the aura emitted from Niu Yud's body." Needless to say, Yin Baikong had already guessed that this terrifying aura came from the direction of the sleeping spring loft. However, what made him shocked was that the closer his divine sense got, the more uncomfortable it became. Even with his cultivation, he couldn't get too close, so he had no choice but to withdraw his divine sense. Heavens! Could it be that this Niu Yud's cultivation was actually higher than his? Yin Baikong took a deep breath and decisively said, "Let's go down the mountain, I'll personally welcome him." "It's just a mere Niu Yud, this disciple will go welcome him. Why would Master personally go down the mountain to welcome him?" Sikongju said. Actually, he had more or less guessed the reason, but he still had to say respectful words. Because he had guessed it, he was even more shocked by this Niu Yud's cultivation. With his cultivation, there's no need to make such a big commotion to take care of a few small shrimps. He did this to make me think it over. It's not good to put on airs, or else it'll be hard to talk when we meet. Let's go. Yin Baikong helplessly shook his head. Previously, he did want to put on airs as one of the top 10 experts, and more or less wanted to tame this spirit-severing expert for his own use. However, from the looks of it now, the other party's cultivation was probably higher than his. At that time, he didn't know who would put on airs. Provoking this great god, he didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. Yu Qianqiu's gaze moved away from the god of Wealth Peak, and the corner of his mouth curled into a smile. Within the range of the aura, he could sense it with his perception. He could even sense the two probing divine senses. One strong and one weak. Not mentioning the weak one, he had already fought with the strong one, and the final result was that the other party retreated. That person was most likely Yin Baikong. Even my world's #1 expert's master was apprehensive of the netherworld ghost flame. How could you resist it? Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly swept his eyes around, but he was secretly happy in his heart. Although the ghost flame he had condensed earlier was not a match for the ghost flame, the concentrated power was not much weaker than the ghost flame. Yin Baikong was only relying on his divine sense to resist, but he was actually at a disadvantage. The ghost flame's restraint on divine sense was quite tyrannical. How could he not be defeated? What are you three waiting for? The people are already lying on the ground. Don't tell me you still don't dare to make a move? Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. Tianyi and the other two were looking around blankly, because they suddenly discovered that the people around them were on the verge of collapse, and some had already collapsed on the ground. But the strange thing was, only the three of them were completely fine. Although they also felt that their surroundings were shrouded by a cold and terrifying aura, it didn't affect them too much. Why were those with higher cultivation than them unable to resist? Hearing Niu Yud's cold snort, the three of them were shocked, and immediately understood that it was Senior Niu's divine ability. Without hesitation, 3 cold lights flashed out, and in an instant, Lu Feng's body on the ground was divided up. Blood splattered everywhere, and dark red flowed on the street. There was no one around to stop them, and Lu Feng didn't resist at all, so they easily succeeded. The 3 of them kept their flying swords, and looked at each other in silence. Then they all looked at Yu Qianqiu, and there was a hint of worry in their eyes. From today onwards, they were Niu Yud's people. If Niu Yud left them alone, then they would definitely meet a tragic end, and the Blue Palace would definitely not let them off. Chapter 595. Yu Qianqiu opened his arms slightly, and a terrifying aura flowed into his body like a tide. The surrounding temperature slowly returned to normal, and the people who had fallen to the ground slowly regained their senses. One by one, they let out a weak moan, looking a little weak. Yulando and Guanzhongkai's cultivation were relatively high. Although their faces were a little pale, it was not a big deal. After all, the death aura that invaded everyone's body had been absorbed by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu didn't want to make things too big at the moment. Otherwise, these people present would be in trouble. Even so, everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with fear in their eyes. Those who could still move dispersed one after another. They had no interest in watching the show. If they had known that they would encounter such a thing, no one would have come to join in the fun. Guanzhongkai was the most depressed. No one here was more unlucky than him. This was the 3rd time he had experienced this terrifying torture. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was torture. After the terrifying aura invaded his body, it constantly dispelled the vitality in his body. His whole person seemed to have become a walking corpse, and his weak consciousness could not control his body at all. It felt like he was struggling on the edge of death. Every second of suffering was worse than a day that felt like a year, and it was extremely uncomfortable. Yulando, who had been messed with twice as soon as she came to cornucopia, also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The two of them looked at each other and looked back and forth. They found that the lively street had been cleared, and most of the people were hiding somewhere. From time to time, people poked their heads out of the shops on both sides of the street to check. Several disciples of Blue Palace looked at Blue Maple's dismembered body on the ground with complicated expressions. They didn't dare to do anything to Niu Yud, and they didn't even dare to say harsh words. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, glanced at them and said indifferently, "Disciples of the Blue Palace, listen up. Go back and tell Fatty Pei that I Niu Yud killed him. If he has any complaints, let him come at me." Guan Zhongkai and Yulando exchanged glances. This Niu Yud was really not afraid of Pei Fong. The whole street, whether it was the people present or those hiding in the dark, had no doubt that Niu Yud was at the same level as the top 10 experts. "From today onwards, the three of you are my subordinates. If there's any trouble, just mention my name, Niu Yud. Let's go." After Yu Qianqiu finished speaking to Amano and the other two, he turned and left. Amano and the other two followed behind excitedly. They felt as though they had ascended to the heavens in a single bound. Happiness had come too suddenly. Even walking felt light. Many people in the shops on both sides of the street poked their heads out and memorized the faces of Amano and the other two. People like the ruthless magistrate Niu Yud must remember this clearly. In the future, don't make a mistake and cause trouble that can't be resolved. Even Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were looking at Amano and the other two enviously. The two of them also turned around and followed him. "Amano, wait up!" A woman's voice came from behind. They all turned around and saw that it was the woman who had gotten into an argument with Amano. It was walking slowly towards them. It was obvious that it was affected by what had just happened, and it was difficult for it to move. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "What's the relationship between you and this woman?" Amano hung his head in pain. A man with a short beard beside him cupped his fists and said, "Senior, her name is Li Qiuxiang. She used to be our big brother's dual cultivation partner. She was later spotted by a disciple of the Blue Palace and left with him. Recently, we heard that she was making a living in the cornucopia of Spring Slumber. At first, we didn't believe it, so we hurried over to verify it. We didn't expect it to be her. Big brother wanted to take her away, but she refused. Senior, you've seen everything that happened after that." Yu Qianqiu said, "I only know Amano's name, but I don't know your names." The man with a short beard bowed and said, "Hai Wei." The man who seemed somewhat quiet replied, "Young Lord Emo." Yu Qianqiu looked at the three of them and nodded slightly. "Amano Hai Wei, young Lord Emo. I'll remember it." He wasn't the only one. Guan Zhongkai, Yulan Du, and the people in the shops on both sides of the street all silently remembered these three names. What a joke! The subordinates of an expert like Niu Yud naturally had to be remembered. "Greetings, Senior Niu." Li Qiuxiang, who was dressed in a pink gauze and had a pretty face, bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu looked at her without batting an eyelid. He didn't know what she wanted. He didn't like women in this line of work, but he didn't hate them either. He had always treated them normally. After all, no woman was born into this line of work. Most of them were forced by life. Of course, Yu Qianqiu had never been too fond of those who did this line of work because they liked ease and hated hard work. Li Qiuxiang turned to look at Amano and said, "Amano, you said you would take me away. Do you still mean what you said?" Amano suddenly looked up and widened his eyes. He said with some excitement, "Qiuxiang, are you really willing to go with me?" "I'll go with you." Li Qiuxiang nodded seriously. Amano grabbed her hand and nodded repeatedly. "Okay, I'll take you away. We'll never be separated again." Even though there weren't many people on the street, whispers could be heard coming from the shops on both sides of the street. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. This woman really knew how to pick the right time. Before, she couldn't even snatch him away. After Amano followed Niu Yud, She immediately went back on her words. Even though this was normal in the cultivation world, she didn't even try to hide it. The group of girls under Sleeping Spring looked at Li Qiuxiang enviously. They envied her for suddenly flying up the tree branch and climbing up the high branch in the blink of an eye. From now on, she wouldn't have to live a life where everyone could bully and humiliate her. In the future, she might even become a famous figure in the cultivation world. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun were quietly sizing up the shocked Niu Yud. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and said, "Wait." Then he asked Li Qiuxiang, "Didn't you say that you and Amano have nothing to do with each other? Why do you want to go with him now?" "Senior is wise," Li Qiuxiang bowed and said. "In the cultivation world, the weak are prey to the strong. Junior is just a weak girl who is bullied everywhere and longs for someone to protect her. The Amano in the past couldn't even protect himself, so how could he protect me? Junior doesn't have a sense of security if I follow him. Instead, I will become a burden to him. But now it's different. Amano has Senior's protection, so how many people in the world dare to touch him? This is what Junior is pursuing. Now that I have this opportunity, even if others call me a shameless whore who can be ridden by thousands of men, I will still have to be thick-skinned and give it a try." The group of women under Sleeping Spring all felt sad when they heard this. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. He shook his head and said, "You are really direct. You don't beat around the bush at all. Riding on a sword to traverse the world. White bones fly like a mountain bird. The world is like a tide and people are like water. How many people in the pugilistic world return for Senior to be able to write such a poem? I know that Senior is an expert who has seen through the world of mortals. No matter what lies I say in front of Senior, it will be hard to escape Senior's discerning eyes. Why should Junior knowingly violate the law?" Li Qiuxiang bowed again and said, "Junior's life has not been easy. I regret that I should not have stepped into the cultivation world. If I had known this would happen, I would have become an ordinary mortal's wife. But when I look back, the tree longs for peace, the wind never ceases. I beg Senior to fulfill my wish." This flattery made Yu Qianqiu feel comfortable. Moreover, her words were polite and well-mannered, so he couldn't help but look at her in a different light. Yu Qianqiu was very surprised and looked at her seriously. Helplessness piled up on his face. The wisdom in his eyes was faintly discernible, but most of the time, it was covered by the vicissitudes and numbness. Looking at Tianye's pleading eyes again, Yu Qianqiu paused. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly. "Li Qiuxiang, although you said you want to follow Tianyi, you actually want to follow me. But don't you think about what you did in the Sleeping Spring brothel? No matter what you say, do you think I will keep a woman like you by my side?" Li Qiuxiang's face immediately turned pale when he said these harsh words. The group of women in the Sleeping Spring brothel were all dejected. What was the difference between him and them? He had smashed the little dreams they had in their hearts. That beautiful lady boss bit her lips with her silver teeth as she stared at Yu Qianqiu. "Senior." Tianyi was almost begging. Yu Qianqiu stared at him coldly, and the surrounding air became cold again. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun quickly pulled him back, indicating that he should not anger the senior. "Tianyi, you know what kind of filthy business she's doing now. Don't you care at all?" Yu Qianqiu turned to Li Qiuxiang and said, "Li Qiuxiang, one must know one's limits. Like you said, you're already a whore that thousands of men ride on. Tianyi might have accepted you in a moment of impulse, but do you really think he can take the mockery of others in the future? Can he endure the torment day after day, year after year? Aren't you afraid that he'll be like the Blue Palace disciples and dump you again? How many times do you want to be dumped by a man in this life?" Every word was like a gem. Li Qiuxiang's face was pale. She looked at Tianyi in a daze and asked with a trembling voice, "Do you care?" "You will." Tianyi covered her mouth and shook his head. "I only care about you. You should know that." "Hee hee. What a joke." Yu Qianqiu said sarcastically. "Tianyi, even if you don't care, ask her. If one day, I Niu Yud, am gone and you, Tianyi, are without my protection, if she meets the disciple of Bai Changchun, the world's #1 expert, who's even more powerful than the Blue Palace disciples, will she abandon you again? She's already said that what she needs is a sense of security, not you. Tianyi, think carefully. The man and the woman looked at each other in a daze. They were provoked by Yu Qianchou's words one after another. It was as if he had crushed their hearts, rubbed them, and trampled on them again. The two of them were so disheartened that they even wanted to die. How cruel. Even Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Do, the two old foxes, felt that it was too much. They looked at each other and shook their heads. They thought to themselves, if you can't stand it, just kill him. You're an expert. Do you really have to do this? You said that Lan Feng's mouth is cheap, but your mouth is even worse than Lan Feng's. Will you? Tianyi asked with difficulty in a hoarse voice. Will I? Li Qiuxiang murmured to herself in a daze. She seemed to have thought of something. After a long time, her eyes regained clarity, but a pitiful smile appeared on her face. She broke free from Tianyi's hand. Tianyi shook his head slowly. He looked at Li Qiuxiang with despair in his eyes. Suddenly his eyes widened. He saw Li Qiuxiang's hands forming claws and clawing at his own face. Under her ferocious fingers, deep bloody marks appeared. His skin and flesh were torn open, revealing his bones. Blood flowed down his chest. Chapter 596. She was a beautiful woman with a beautiful face. In the blink of an eye, her beautiful face became a bloody mess. The white bones that were exposed were even more frightening. How could one see her original face clearly? For such a beautiful woman to do such a vicious thing to her own face. How much determination did she have to make to do so? Everyone was stunned. The heads that stuck out from the shop could not shrink back in. They all looked at this scene in disbelief. There was such a crazy woman. Sister-in-law. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun cried out in unison. When the stunned Amano came to his senses, he let out a tragic cry. No! She grabbed the hands that were still scratching her face and asked, Why did you do this? Why did you do this? She was already sobbing. Li Qiuxiang raised that face that had become abnormally terrifying. Blood continuously flowed, and the front of her body was dyed red with blood. He chuckled and said, Amano, do you believe me? I believe, I always believed. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have hesitated just now. Tianyi wailed and stomped his feet. No, it's not your fault. Li Qiuxiang shook her bloody face and said, Senior is right. If there is someone to blame, it's me. Looking for a sense of security is just an excuse. It's my own weak mind. I've always wanted to climb up the social ladder. I deserve this. Don't say any more. Hurry up and stop the bleeding. Tianyi wanted to raise his hand to cover her bleeding face, but her face was too badly scratched. He did not know where to start. Li Qiuxiang shook her head again and smiled. It's better if my blood flows clean. I want to be a new person. Unfortunately, her face was too horrifying. No one could tell that she was smiling. Sister Qiuxiang. Below spring slumber, a woman who was probably on good terms with Li Qiuxiang wanted to rush over, but was held back by the lady boss. The lady boss said with tears in her eyes, Let her. This is her chance. Don't disturb her. The group of women all started sobbing. Hai Wei Xiaojun, hurry up and help me. Help her stop the bleeding. Tianyi was flustered. He did not know where to start. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun hurriedly took out some things from their storage bags, and the three men squatted there and got busy. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at the culprit at the same time, only to see Niu Yid standing there coldly without any expression on his face. The two of them were speechless. People really couldn't be compared with each other. By the time the three men were done, Li Qiuxiang's entire face was almost completely covered. Yu Qianchou snorted coldly. He turned around and said, Guan Zhongkai, let's go. Your Grand Master Yin Baikong is still waiting for me. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan secretly looked at Li Qiuxiang, then followed behind Yu Qianchou without another word. As the three of them walked forward, all the heads in the shop that had been shaken once again shrunk back. Senior. Amano ran over and stopped in front of Yu Qianchou. He knelt down and begged, Senior, please let me bring her along. She has repented. Whether she repented or not, What does that have to do with me? Either you go with her, or you go with me. Choose one of the two, do as you see fit. Don't block my way, get out of my way. Yu Qianqiu kicked Amano to the side of the street. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan suddenly realized that it was a little embarrassing to follow behind Niu Yud. They scratched their faces in unison and looked at each other blankly. Yu Qianqiu walked a few steps, then suddenly turned around and said, "What about the two of you? Are you going with the two of them, or me? There's only one chance, I don't have the patience to ask again." He was asking Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun. A bunch of heads popped out from the shop again, all staring at Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun, waiting to see what they would do. Would they go with the two of them, or with Niu Yud? However, everyone guessed that the two of them would choose the latter. This was definitely an opportunity that could only be encountered by chance. Niu Yud, who had the strength to rival the top 10 experts. Who could resist such a temptation? It was a great temptation. As the two of them, they had experienced it firsthand and were struggling in their hearts. On one hand, they were good brothers who had been together for many years. On the other hand, they had the opportunity to change their lives. It was indeed difficult to decide which way to go. Amano quietly climbed up from the side of the street and walked to the two of them. He smiled bitterly and patted their shoulders heavily, saying, "Go. Go with Senior Niu. This is a rare opportunity. Make good use of it." "Big brother." Hai Wei pressed the hand on his shoulder. Mo Xiaojun smiled and asked, "Big brother, what about you?" Amano looked at Li Qiuxiang, who was standing alone, and smiled warmly. Some people can't miss a second chance after they've missed it once. You two follow Senior Niu well, take care. After saying that, he pushed the two of them away and walked resolutely towards Li Qiuxiang. The two of them looked at each other, and suddenly nodded heavily at each other. They bowed deeply to Yu Qianqiu, then turned around and shouted, "Big brother!" and strode away without looking back. The crowd was in an uproar. The two of them were clearly giving up the opportunity to follow Niu Yud. Everyone was somewhat impressed, but they also felt that it was foolish to do so. After killing Blue Maple, the three of them had no way out. Without Niu Yud's protection, they might not even live to see tomorrow. Yu Qianqiu silently turned around and squinted at the three of them. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan shook their heads slightly. This Niu Yud had a bad temper. Daring to disrespect him like this, the three of them were probably going to suffer. Amano turned around, his expression unusually agitated, but he reprimanded. "What are you doing? Go back, go back." Hai Wei laughed heartily. "Big brother, don't try to persuade me. We've been brothers for so many years, and we've come out of bloodshed together. If we suddenly break up, I won't be used to it." Mo Xiaojun nodded. "That's right. Big brother doesn't want to miss sister-in-law again, but the two of us don't want to miss you, big brother, even once. Otherwise, we'll regret it for the rest of our lives. Aren't you stupid? If you follow me, Blue Palace won't let you go." Amano laughed and scolded with tears in his eyes. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun looked at each other and laughed. Hai Wei said heartily, "We'll talk about the future in the future. At most, we'll just die. Besides, it's not certain. The three of us have been able to survive in the cultivation world back to back until now. Our lives have always been tough." Li Qiuxiang, whose face was covered with a white cloth, suddenly burst into tears. The three of them were surprised when they heard her shout, "Go! Go! I don't want you to care about me. I'm not worth it. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore." The three of them walked over silently. Amano put his arm around her shoulders and chuckled. "Stop talking nonsense. Let's go." They had only taken a few steps when Li Qiuxiang suddenly broke free and rushed to a place a few meters away from Yu Qianqiu. She knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have stained Senior's eyes. I'll bear all the blame alone. It has nothing to do with them. Senior, just pretend that you've never seen me." As soon as she finished speaking, a flying sword flashed out of the storage bag on her waist that was stained with blood. Li Qiuxiang grabbed the flying sword and swiftly slid it across her neck. She was very decisive. "No." Amano and the other two shouted in despair. It was too late to save her even if they wanted to. The women below spring slumber cried out in alarm. Humph. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and waved his hand. When the sword in Li Qiuxiang's hand was about to touch her neck, it suddenly shattered into a cloud of silver powder that drifted away. This scene made everyone suck in a cold breath. From a few meters away, with a wave of his hand, the flying sword was shattered into powder without any sound. If this trick was used on a human, what would the consequences be? Killing without a sound or a trace. Unbeknownst to them, this trick of Yu Qianqiu had no effect on a human. Amano and the other two quickly rushed over. Li Qiuxiang simply wouldn't stop until she was dead. After a slight pause, she bounced up and slammed her head into a tree by the roadside a few meters away. When Amano and the other two reached out, they almost touched the corner of her clothes, but they still missed and didn't manage to catch her. Amano kicked the ground and dodged to the side. He reached out to grab her again. His cultivation level was much higher than Li Qiuxiang's. Although he was a little slower, he still managed to catch her. TSS. The corner of her clothes that he grabbed was directly torn apart. Li Qiuxiang had already made up her mind to die. She used a lot of strength and managed to grab her clothes, but didn't manage to stop her. She still crashed straight into the tree. Damn it! Yu Qianqiu was really speechless. He quickly hit the tree with his palm. Just as Li Qiuxiang was about to crash into the tree, thick white smoke suddenly burst out from the tree. Li Qiuxiang's figure disappeared into the smoke. In the blink of an eye, she emerged from the other side and fell into the shop opposite. The thick white smoke was like white silk, shooting towards Yu Qianqiu at high speed, and all of it disappeared into his palm. Amano's mouth opened and closed. He didn't dare to hesitate anymore. He directly flashed into the shop and grabbed Li Qiuxiang's palm that was about to hit the top of his head. He injected his energy into her body and quickly controlled her. He shook her shoulder and shouted, "Why are you so stupid?" Everyone looked at Li Qiuxiang, who was covered in dust, and then looked at the tree outside. All of them were dumbfounded. They saw that the branches of the tree, from top to bottom, had all turned a deathly gray. The originally dark green leaves had also shriveled and lost their luster. And there was a hole in the tree. Obviously, it was left behind when Li Qiuxiang passed through it. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly, not knowing what was going on. In particular, the white smoke that Yu Qianqiu had sent out with his palm strike was even more baffling. In the shop, Li Qiuxiang, who was being carried by Amano, muttered to herself, "I have no dignity when I live. Is it so hard to die with a little dignity? Why don't you let me die? If you want to have dignity, you can't exchange it with death." Yu Qianqiu stood outside and said calmly, "I've saved you twice. This life of yours no longer belongs to you. It belongs to me. From today onwards you are mine. Whether you live or die, it's not up to you." As soon as these words came out, gasps of surprise sounded everywhere. The meaning of Niu Yud's words couldn't be clearer. Li Qiuxiang's bitterness was over, and she had been accepted by this ruthless judge. Even though these words were a little roundabout, as long as one wasn't a fool, they could tell. Chapter 597. The ones who found it the most unbelievable were probably Tianyi and the others. Li Qiuxiang stared at Yu Qianqiu in a daze. Tianyi, who came to his senses, shook Li Qiuxiang with wild joy and said, "Hurry up and thank Senior Niu. Hurry, hurry." He was so excited that he didn't know what to say. He directly pulled her out. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun also followed in surprise. The 3 men and 1 woman knelt down side by side and kowtowed. Li Qiuxiang choked with sobs. She wanted to say thank you, but she couldn't. The women in the dormant spring building were crying, but no one knew whether they were crying for Li Qiuxiang or crying for their own tragic fate. "The 3 of you have decided to leave, so you have nothing to do with me anymore. Why are you still bowing to me?" Yu Qianqiu stared at Tianyi and the others and said indifferently. This sentence was no less than a lightning strike. The 4 of them froze there, not knowing what to do. The women in the dormant spring building all quieted down and looked over quietly. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. This Niu Yud was too good at tormenting people. The people in the shops on the street shook their heads and smiled bitterly. At first, the 3 of them left for this woman. Now that Niu Yud accepted this woman, he didn't accept the three of them. No matter what, they still couldn't be together. Senior, Li Qiuxiang said with a trembling voice, please give them another chance. However, Yu Qianqiu slowly closed his eyes and ignored her. Tianyi and the others looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Tianyi slowly stood up and said to Li Qiuxiang, the three of us have nothing to begin with, so we won't lose anything if we leave. However, since you have a way out, this trip is not in vain. Qiuxiang, this opportunity is hard to come by. Follow Senior well. Let's go. Tianyi said to Highway and Mo Xiaojun helplessly. The three of them silently turned around and left. No. Li Qiuxiang let out a heart-wrenching scream and kowtowed 3 times to Yu Qianqiu. Without saying a word, she jumped up and blocked the three of them, saying, Tianyi, you can't leave me alone. If you want to leave, we'll leave together. As soon as these words came out, everyone present was moved. In order to have a good future, this woman had fallen to the point of selling her body. Now she had disfigured herself and committed suicide, making her life incomparably tragic. She had finally found a good future, but for the sake of a man, she gave it up without hesitation. This kind of courage and temperament made a bunch of people with eyes of power and hearts of stone feel deep respect. Just based on this point, even if she had sold herself in a brothel, no one would look down on her now. Sister-in-law. Highway couldn't help but shout. Mo Xiaojun laughed. This trip is really worth it. I found a good sister-in-law. Amano excitedly grabbed Li Qiuxiang's hand and nodded. Okay, let's go together. The four of them looked at each other and silently moved forward, enjoying the attention of everyone. The group of women in the dormant spring house, however, seemed to have received a rude awakening, and all of them were dumbfounded. In a trance, he seemed to have understood something. Was it worth it to go through so much suffering and even sell his body to pursue something? As a woman, who else could be happier than Li Qiuxiang? After Li Qiuxiang had died once, she had finally found what she truly wanted. The group of women, each and every one of them felt a sense of loss, crying silently, remembering the happiness that they had so easily given up. In the beginning, they wanted nothing more than to tear Niu Yud into pieces. Why was this person so cold-hearted, ravaging these people to the point that they hovered between life and death, wanting to break up a pair of mandarin ducks with a bitter fate? However, they could only keep their hatred in their hearts. If they wanted to take care of Niu Yud, even if they all attacked him together, they wouldn't have the ability. Now they were envious of Li Qiuxiang. After Niu Yud let her die once, he helped her find her sense of self. Among the people present, who would look down on her because she had sold herself, everyone was certain that she and Amano would truly be together for the rest of their lives. After this ordeal of hovering between life and death, no matter how cruel the reality was in the future, he and she would never leave each other, and would never be separated again. Although Li Qiuxiang's face was disfigured, from today onwards, she had truly transcended the sea of bitterness. They were incomparably envious of Li Qiuxiang. They had the same fate but different fortunes. Now they were very much looking forward to meeting their fated Niu Yud. However, where was the Niu Yud who could save their fates? Suddenly, a cold snort came from the quiet street. Coming and going as you please, who do you think I Niu Yud am? It's over. These two words suddenly appeared in everyone's minds. With a swoosh, all eyes were focused on Niu Yud, who had his eyes slightly closed. Even Yulan secretly clicked her tongue, but Guan Zhongkai felt a nameless fire in his heart, and he couldn't help but glare at Niu Yud. He thought, you've already tormented them to this extent. Don't tell me you still don't want to let them go? If you want to be a bad person, then be more direct. Don't beat around the bush. There's no one like you. The group of women in dormant spring instantly tensed up, looking at Niu Yud worriedly. Almost all of them were praying in their hearts. Please spare them. The beautiful lady boss, who had experienced all kinds of things in the mortal world, suddenly had an epiphany, and there was no worry on her face. Instead, her bright eyes were glowing, and she looked at Niu Yud with a smile. Amano and the other three stiffened, unable to move anymore, and slowly turned around. They knew that with Niu Yud's miraculous means just now, Even if they wanted to escape, they wouldn't be able to. If he wanted to kill them, it would be as easy as raising his hand. Where could they escape to? Senior, can you let us go? Amano smiled bitterly. Yu Qianqiu slowly opened his eyes, staring at the four of them, and said coldly, "The four of you have betrayed me once. I hope that the four of you will remember it. Although I, Niu Yud, have always won people over with my virtue, there can't be a second time. I hope that you will grasp this second chance well. And it will also be your last chance. If you dare to do it again, I guarantee that you won't even have the chance to regret. Let's go." Yu Qianqiu threw a sentence at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan, who were beside him, and turned to leave. The two of them were still pondering the meaning in his words. And then they immediately came to a realization. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, then looked at Amano and the other three, and shook their heads. Before leaving, Guan Zhongkai waved at the four of them, and said, "Why are the four of you still in a daze? Didn't you hear Senior Niu say that he has already given you a second chance? What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and catch up." After saying this, Guan Zhongkai suddenly felt a sense of relief in his heart, a very refreshing kind of relief. He was even more pleased than when his cultivation had increased by a level, and he didn't understand why. The two of them followed Niu Yud slowly forward, and they no longer felt embarrassed like before. Instead, they felt that they had gained face. What was the demeanor of an expert? The behavior of this awesome person in front of them was the demeanor of an expert. Happiness came too suddenly, and Amano and the other three were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Words could no longer describe their current feelings. "Don't make Senior Niu unhappy anymore. Hurry up and catch up." In the shop, a hot-blooded youth with an unknown name waved and shouted with all his might. "Hurry up and catch up. Hurry up and catch up." Everyone couldn't help but shout, and the cornucopia was filled with a passion that had never been seen before. An unforeseen legendary story was happening in front of everyone's eyes. It was filled with too much unpredictability, revisiting the forces in human nature, revisiting the common joys and sorrows in the cultivation world, revisiting the true nature that everyone had long forgotten. It was like a dream, full of ups and downs, twists and turns. In the midst of despair, everyone saw the ending that they had been anticipating. Everyone's emotions that had been suppressed for a long time couldn't help but burst out in this wave of shouting. Bang! In the midst of everyone's shouting, there was a sudden sound of collapse, and smoke and dust rose in all directions on the street, suppressing everyone's emotions that had yet to be completely vented. They saw that the tree that Li Qiuxiang had pierced through suddenly collapsed, and in the blink of an eye, the tree turned into dust that filled the air. Everyone gasped again, and only now did they understand the meaning of Niu Yud's palm. It turned out that this tree had already been smashed into dust by Niu Yud's palm, and that was why Li Qiuxiang was fine when she rammed into it. Now the tree was still standing here, but it was just an illusion. In the end, after being shaken by everyone's shouting, it collapsed on the spot. Everyone looked at Niu Yud, who was slowly moving forward, and his gait was so calm. His back was faintly discernible in the dust, and the more he showed the demeanor of an expert, the more mysterious he became. The group of women in Sleeping Spring Loft still had tears in their eyes, and they all stared at the back of that figure, their eyes full of admiration and respect. The graceful lady boss bit her lip with her pearly white teeth, and murmured with a smile, "Bad guy. Why did you have to make such a simple matter full of ups and downs, causing me to be vexed for so long?" Although she scolded like this, how could she not understand in her heart? If Niu Yud didn't do this, would Amano and Li Qiuxiang really last long? Not necessarily. Now that Li Qiuxiang had been forced to be reborn from the dead, and had been reborn, she could now be an upright person. He had already given Li Qiuxiang the dignity that she wanted to be a human, and the future would depend on Li Qiuxiang herself. Hidden under the cold and indifferent surface was his good intentions. Ruthless, decisive, resourceful, intelligent, and capable, this was a real man. The lady boss, who had experienced all kinds of situations in the world, secretly evaluated Niu Yud in her heart. Amano felt that his throat was a little dry, and a simple syllable jumped out of his mouth. "Let's go." The four of them nodded excitedly, and didn't care that the dust would dirty their bodies. 4 figures flew up, passed through the pervasive smoke, and followed behind the 3 people in front. Niu Yud, all of you get back here. A delicate shout suddenly rang out from the street. F***ck. Who had such guts? Everyone turned their heads to look, and the dust had already gradually dissipated. They saw the lady boss of Sleeping Spring Loft standing in the middle of the street, her hands on her voluptuous and graceful waist, like a shrew cursing in the street, staring at the people in front of her with her almond-shaped eyes. The crowd was in an uproar. Did she want to die? She actually called the ruthless magistrate Niu Yud by his name? What was going on today? Accidents kept happening one after another. The people in front of them were stunned, and they all turned around. Yu Qianqiu was even more baffled, and his face was full of astonishment. Guan Zhongkai shouted angrily. Yanyu, what are you trying to do? Are you tired of living? Chapter 598. In the rear hall of the treasure-gathering hall at the foot of the God of Wealth Peak, Yin Baikong, clad in a black robe, stood upright with his eyes closed, silently listening to the movements in the distance. He could only hear the cheers from time to time, and at other times it was so quiet that there was no sound at all. Yin Baikong frowned and opened his eyes. Why aren't they here yet? What the hell is Niu Yud doing? Standing at the side, Sikongju, who looked even older than his master, said, Master, why don't you go back first? I'll welcome him. How could a mere Niu Yud make you wait here for so long? Yin Baikong was a little hesitant, but he saw a person excitedly rushing in from outside. The person nodded at Sikongju and bowed to him. Master, under Niu Yud's interference, the Blue Palace's disciple was killed. Niu Yud is now. The man reported everything that had happened so far in detail. Yin Baikong's face was full of smiles when he heard that a disciple of Blue Palace had been killed. He was imagining Fatty Pei's furious reaction when he heard the news. Suddenly, he heard that Niu Yud was entangled by a girl from a brothel. He could not help but be stunned. He chuckled and said, Interesting. Come, let's go and take a look. Spring Slumber Tower? Sikongju asked. Seeing his master nod his head, he immediately said anxiously, Master, with your identity, how can you go to that kind of place? Sigh. Yin Baikong raised his hand to stop him from speaking. He smiled happily and said, Niu Yud's cultivation is probably not lower than mine. Even he is willing to throw away his face to tangle with them. What else do I have to worry about? I'll just watch the show. But this will make it seem as if you are personally going to pay a visit to him. Sikongju's words were once again interrupted. Yin Baikong shook his head and said, What time is it now? You still care about that? Let's go and take a look. Since his master had already made his decision, it would not be good for him to stop him again and again, so he could only follow him out. However, how could the scene of Yin Baikong showing his face here be small? No matter how low-key he was, more than 10 experts at the end of the Tribulation Transcendence stage immediately appeared to accompany him. Guan Zhongkai couldn't understand it. She was a smart woman who was used to seeing where the wind blew, but she was the only one who could take advantage of others. No one could take advantage of her. But today he took the wrong medicine and rushed to die. Glancing at Li Qiuxiang, he felt a little depressed. Could it be that she was addicted to suicide today? The lady boss rolled her eyes at him. She was so alluring that the men in the shops on both sides of the street swallowed their saliva. However, everyone knew that this piece of fragrant meat was notoriously hard to get. They could only enjoy it with their eyes and let their imaginations run wild. She dared to play for real. Although she was a woman, she had a wide range of connections, and was not someone ordinary people could afford to offend. Thus, all of them unscrupulously glanced at her curvaceous and graceful figure. Their eyes filled with greed without any restraint. Guan Zhongkai was stunned when she rolled her eyes at him. He cursed in his heart, Smelly woman, one day I'll get you on my bed and let you know how powerful I am. Although he was still scowling, he could no longer be stubborn. His imposing manner weakened as he shouted, Yanyu, what do you want? So her name was Yanyu. Most people who dared to do this kind of business had a wide range of connections. If there was a chance, he could make friends with them. It would be beneficial to him. Yu Qianqiu sized her up seriously. Previously he had been maintaining the demeanor of an expert, so he hadn't looked her in the eye. Now that he saw her clearly, he couldn't help but praise her in his heart. She was indeed a rare beauty in the cultivation world. I'll settle the score with him. Yin Yu pointed one of her slender fingers at Yu Qianqiu without hesitation. Everyone was in an uproar. This coquettish lady boss really didn't want to live anymore. They all shook their heads with some regret. It was a pity for this good body. They hoped that the ruthless judge, Niu Yud, would be merciful. Otherwise, the treasure bowl would lose a beautiful scenery that was pleasing to the eye. Guan Zhongkai glanced at the puzzled Yu Qianqiu and immediately shouted, Senior Niu doesn't know you. What's there to settle the score with you? Don't mess around. If you anger Senior Niu, no one can protect you. Then he laughed at Yu Qianqiu and said, Senior, don't bother with this crazy woman. She has always been crazy. He still wanted to try to protect her. After all, she was a piece of meat that he had never tasted before. It would be a pity to ruin it. However, with Niu Yud's strange temper, he could only give it a try. If it didn't work, he wouldn't come forward again. No matter how fragrant the meat was, it wasn't as important as his own life. Although this was the headquarters of the World Commerce Association, he was very sure that Niu Yud wouldn't have any misgivings when he attacked. He didn't want to be implicated. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, indicating for him to shut up. Then he put his hands behind his back and slowly walked back with narrowed eyes. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The group had no choice but to follow him back. Among them, Li Qiuxiang was a little nervous. She understood that although the lady boss was sometimes shrewish, she still took care of the sisters in the building. She more or less didn't want anything to happen to her. However, her own identity was awkward and it wasn't good for her to speak. Yin Yu watched as Yu Qianqiu coldly walked over. Her heart was thumping wildly. It would be a lie if she said she wasn't afraid, but she didn't want to miss this opportunity to get to know Niu Yud. Some men decided that as long as it was worth it, they would happily make their move. Otherwise, once they missed it, there wouldn't be another chance. Her heart was thumping wildly, but on the surface, she was shrewish and calm. The group of women in the dormant spring building turned pale, revealing timid expressions. They didn't know why the lady boss would provoke such a terrifying person. Yu Qianqiu walked over with his hands behind his back. He coldly stood in front of Yin Yu, and at the same time saw the flash of fear in the other's eyes. He snorted coldly and circled around Yin Yu, sizing up her figure without the slightest scruple. Yin Yu wanted to pretend to be calm, but she also felt her hair stand on end. She felt her body stiffen as she stood there. When he returned to face Yin Yu once more, Yu Qianqiu stretched out a hand, and his 2 fingers curled as he stroked her fair, tender, and round chin. He said indifferently, You want to settle the score with me? You're not afraid of me? The surroundings were deathly silent. No one was breathing heavily as they watched this scene. It was hard for everyone to imagine what kind of scene it would be when such a beautiful woman suddenly splattered with blood. The atmosphere was very tense. I've seen many men. Why would I be afraid of you? She replied calmly, but her body remained motionless. Yu Qianqiu's 2 fingers slid down to her exposed shoulders. He gently caressed them and said, You still say you're not afraid of me? I'm getting goosebumps. As soon as he finished speaking, he couldn't help but snicker. He cursed inwardly, Damn it. Facing such a beautiful woman, who pretended to be an expert, was a bastard. In any case, I won't pretend anymore. Niu Yud was laughing lewdly. Everyone was stunned. Yin Yu breathed a sigh of relief. She slapped away Yu Qianqiu's slap and said, You're an expert. Don't be serious. She thought to herself, It'd be strange if I wasn't scared. I'm about to pee my pants because of you. Yu Qianqiu's hand that had been slapped away went back to her soft waist. He chuckled and said, Didn't you say you want to settle accounts with me? How? He pointed at the dormant spring restaurant and said, Shall we go to your room, get on your bed, and strip naked? Then we can settle accounts. Don't take advantage of me. Yin Yu's shoulders shook and her soft waist shook. She pushed Yu Qianqiu away and said, It's to settle accounts. Clang. The sound of a door being knocked over came from one of the shops. Everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They all thought they were seeing things. In the atmosphere of sharpening knives, the two of them suddenly turned into flirting. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? The tense atmosphere suddenly became ambiguous. It was hard for everyone to get used to it. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. Everyone admired the lady boss's courage. She was indeed a beauty who had seen the world. Even Niu Yid raised his hands in surrender. Settle accounts? Yu Qianqiu looked at the signboard of the dormant spring restaurant in astonishment. He asked suspiciously, "We've never met before, right? It's also my first time coming to Cornucopia. When did I ever patronize your business or owe you money?" The three of them. Yin Yuchong pointed at Amano and the other two and said, "The three of them came here to spend money, but they didn't pay a single cent. Now they want to run away after following you. If I don't ask you for money, who should I ask?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Amano and the other two were even more embarrassed. Guan Zhongkai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Yin Yu, don't go too far. This is only a small amount of money. With Senior Niu's reputation, it's far more than this amount. You're usually a very shrewd person. What are you doing today?" "Master Guan, that's where you're wrong." Yin Yu waved her arm and pointed at the women downstairs. She said, "Us sisters don't have an easy life. We're in the flesh business, which is looked down upon by everyone. Of course, Master Guan naturally doesn't care about this small amount of money. But for us, it's money that we shamelessly exchanged with our dignity." Turning his head, he said to Yu Qianqiu, "It's true that you, Senior Niu, are an expert of the present age. But do you have the nerve to shortchange us brothers and sisters, who shed blood and tears and sold our dignity in exchange for a little bit of money?" His words almost made Yu Qianqiu feel ashamed. Yin Yu turned her head and said to Guan Zhongkai, "Master Guan, my sleeping spring loft has always paid taxes in full and on time. We've never been late. It stands to reason that we should enjoy the protection of your World Chamber of Commerce and help us collect our debts from our creditors. How can you be like this? You're the first to break the rules. How can we do business in the future?" Guan Zhongkai was speechless at her big accusation. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted, "Well said! From today onwards, Sleeping Spring Loft's business in Cornucopia will no longer collect any taxes. It's tax-free." The voice rolled and echoed throughout the whole street with great momentum. It was easy to imagine the background of someone who dared to speak so arrogantly in Cornucopia. Guan Zhongkai's expression changed greatly. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and his pupils shrank. A few dozen people walked over from the street. The person in the lead was a well-dressed man in a black robe, calmly walking over. Yu Qianqiu's gaze fell on Sikongju beside him. The identity of the person who could make Sikongju accompany him was obvious. In addition, he had seen this person's appearance in the portraits of the various World Chamber of Commerce branches. Although he didn't have the sage-like demeanor in the portraits, who else could it be other than Yin Baikong? A late-stage soul formation expert, one of the top 10 experts in the world, Yin Baikong, had come in person. Chapter 599. Yin Baikong was also sizing up Yu Qianqiu. He had seen the portrait of Niu Yid sent by the branch. After identifying him, a smile appeared on his face. He quickened his pace and left the entourage behind him, striding towards a clear goal. "It's Yin Baikong." A young man's eyes widened. He couldn't help but shout, but was slapped by the teacher next to him. The latter whispered, "You dare to call him by his name here? Do you want to die?" The young man shut his mouth in embarrassment. Niu Yid's limelight was instantly stolen by Yin Baikong. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Yin Baikong's figure as he moved forward. One of the top 10 experts in the world. There were only a few spirit-severing late-stage experts in the world. For most people, he was a legendary figure that they had never seen before. This person usually lived on the God of Wealth Peak in the Treasure Basin. Although it felt close at hand, not everyone had the opportunity to see him. Usually, everyone would look up at the peak, wanting to see the true appearance of one of the top 10 experts through the misty clouds. This was something that every cultivator who entered the treasure basin couldn't help but do. After all, not every spirit-severing late-stage expert could live so close to them. How could other spirit-severing late-stage experts give everyone the opportunity to look up at them? Especially the legendary #1 expert in the world, Bai Changchun. Most cultivators only knew of this legend in the demon domain. Apart from those spirit-severing late-stage experts, who else had seen him? Even if Bai Changchun appeared on the street at this time, who would recognize him? This legendary figure at the peak of the cultivation world, every time he appeared, it would be earth-shattering, shocking the entire cultivation world. When everyone arrived at the place where the legend once appeared, there was no trace of him. It made people sigh. They didn't even have the opportunity to look up at him. Although the God of Wealth Peak was just a misty mountain, it was enough to make the hearts of the cultivators who entered this place feel heavy. This was because the first thing that caught the eyes of the cultivators who came here was this mountain peak, where the legendary figure lived. Over time, everyone came here with the mentality of a pilgrimage. Baikong was like this God of Wealth Peak, intimidating the entire treasure basin. Those who came here to do business almost didn't need to be restrained. They obediently did things according to the rules. No one dared to cause trouble. Of course, people like Niu Yud were rare. Other than the disciples of the World Commerce Company, not many people had seen Baikong's true appearance, but the various shops of the Cornucopia World Commerce Company all had Baikong's portrait. No one had seen him in person, but they already knew him. At this moment, the real person appeared, a legend of the cultivation world. The street was quiet. Only the footsteps of the dozens of people could be heard. Damn it. This old bastard really gave me face. He actually came to welcome me personally. He really made me proud. Yu Qianqiu was not stingy with his face full of smiles. However, in his heart he was somewhat grumbling. Unfortunately, it was not convenient for him to use Yu Qianqiu's identity to do bad things. What a waste. The name of Niu Yud could not be used for long. It was too famous, and it would be a pity to lose it. Yin Yu was startled, and she felt a little nervous. She had only heard of this legendary figure for many years, but now, he was walking towards her. Even though she knew that he was not here for her. When she was still a dozen meters away from Yu Qianqiu, Baikong laughed heartily and said, "I heard that Brother Niu was coming, so I have been waiting for you. However, I still haven't seen Brother Niu at God of Wealth Peak. I was impatient and wanted to meet you, so I came here abruptly. I hope I didn't disturb Brother Niu's mood?" As he said this, he glanced meaningfully at Sleeping Spring Loft. Although these words were a bit mocking, whether it was the content or the face, it was enough. Even Baikong addressed Niu Yud as brother, and in such a respectful manner. This shocked everyone on the street. When they looked at Yu Qianqiu again, their gazes were filled with extreme reverence. Without a doubt, this person was a soul formation final stage expert. Face had to be given to each other. Yu Qianqiu laughed and took 3 steps forward. He cupped his fists and said, "Brother Yin is too polite. I originally wanted to go up the mountain to disturb you after settling a small matter. I didn't expect Brother Yin to personally come. I am quite flattered." As he said this, he felt a bit annoyed. Baikong was someone from the same generation as Master. If Master found out that he was calling him brother, would there be any trouble? The two of them stood face to face and looked at each other. Then they laughed heartily. It was one thing for everyone to give each other face, but for Baikong, if news of his friendship with Niu Yud were to spread, it would increase the pressure on certain people, especially Fatty Pei, who had just been slapped in the face by Niu Yud. Martial ancestor. Guan Zhongkai saluted while trembling with fear. "Greetings, senior." Yulando, Yinyu, and Tianyi all saluted. At this time, Tianyi and the others were indescribably excited and excited. Senior Niu was indeed not an ordinary person. To be able to make a soul formation final stage expert, Baikong, personally greet him, as Niu Yud's subordinates, they naturally basked in the limelight. They enjoyed the envious gazes of the crowd. Baikong smiled and raised his hand, indicating that there was no need to be overly courteous. The demeanor of an expert was undoubtedly on full display. When his gaze swept past Li Qiuxiang, he slightly paused. He had just received a report about her, so he naturally knew what was going on. "Greetings, Senior Niu." Si Kongju and the others also saluted. "I wonder what it is that made Brother Niu stay?" Yin Baikong asked despite knowing the answer. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at Yin Baikong, indicating for him to wait a moment. His face darkened as he roared at Tian Yi and the other two. "What do you three want? Hurry up and give them the money you owe them, damn it. I've heard of people eating and dashing, but I've never heard of people acting so arrogantly in a brothel. It's my bad luck to run into you guys. I've lost all my face." Yin Baikong paused for a moment, then smiled. Tian Yi was terrified as he asked Yin Yu, "How much money?" Yin Yu forcefully suppressed her pounding heart. Good heavens, two soul formation final stage experts had come at the same time. The Sleeping Spring brothel was truly an honor. Originally, with this face and the influence it brought to the Sleeping Spring brothel, she shouldn't have taken the money. But Yen Yu gritted her teeth and waved at the Sleeping Spring brothel, only to see a trembling woman walking over and fearfully saying, 33 high-grade spirit stones and 16 mid-grade spirit stones. Yen Yu waved her hand, and the woman retreated as if she had been pardoned. Tian Yi was stunned, then said with some disbelief, "The three of us didn't do anything in there. We just asked for some things. How could it cost more than 30 high-grade spirit stones? You didn't calculate wrongly, did you?" Yen Yu sweetly smiled. "I didn't charge you a single spirit stone. You should know that the chairs you broke were all made of high-grade purple Qilin wood. If you don't know the price, why don't you ask around first? Then you'll know if I'm lying or not." Tian Yi was startled. He had heard of the price of purple Qilin wood furniture. He also knew that she wasn't lying. Without saying anything, he injected his divine sense into his storage bag, and found that there weren't even 10 high-grade spirit stones in total. So he weakly asked Hai Wei and Emo Xiaojun, "I'm still lacking, do you have any more?" The two who were asked looked a little embarrassed. They both glanced at Tian Yi. "You still don't know our wealth. Are you deliberately trying to embarrass us?" Actually, the three of them were together every day. They all knew exactly how many spirit stones they had. Emo Xiaojun directly untied his storage bag and gave it to him. Hai Wei did the same. They didn't say how much money they had. With a bitter face, Tian Yi injected his divine sense into the two storage pouches, and found that it was just as he expected. The spirit stones in the 3 storage pouches added up to less than 30 upper-grade spirit stones. Anyone could see that the 3 of them were embarrassed. They were loose cultivators after all. Most of them didn't have a source of spirit stones. It would be strange if they had a lot of money. Li Qiuxiang's face was covered with a cloth. Her expression couldn't be seen. Her hand touched the storage bag at her waist, but there was no movement. It wasn't that she couldn't bear to part with the spirit stones, but she was afraid that Tian Yi wouldn't be able to accept the spirit stones that she had obtained by selling her body. Yin Baikong glanced at Si Kongju. The latter understood and nodded at Guan Zhongkai. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly took out his storage bag and paid for it in front of Yen Yu. "Wait. I can't afford to let others pay for a brothel. I can't afford to lose face." Yu Qianqiu stopped Guan Zhongkai, walked over to Tian Yi and the other 2 storage bags, injected his divine sense into them, and coldly snorted, "Shove them back." Then he took out a piece of purple spirit stone and threw it to Yen Yu. Yen Yu looked at the sparkling purple spirit stone in her hand. She couldn't help but cover her mouth. Everyone stared at the spirit stone in her hand. The legendary top-grade spirit stone? Although the group didn't say anything, their minds instantly became active. Si Kongju quickly glanced at his master, and Yin Baikong's pupil shrunk. His left index finger tapped on the back of his right hand a few times. Then he immediately calmed down. "Let's go, don't embarrass yourself here." Yu Qianqiu cursed at the few of them, then turned around and walked away. A top-grade spirit stone worth 10,000 high-grade spirit stones was casually given, but he didn't mention anything about asking for change. He was really generous. It wasn't in line with his style. "Senior Niu, please wait a moment." Yin Yu called out. Yu Qianqiu turned back and said, "What's wrong?" Could it be that a top-grade spirit stone isn't worth 30 high-grade spirit stones? His words confirmed everyone's guess, and they looked at the purple spirit stone with even more amazement. Yanyu walked over with a smile, and ambiguously grabbed Yu Qianqiu's hand, stuffing the top-grade spirit stone into his palm, and charmingly said, "Senior must be joking. How would Yanyu dare to accept such a valuable thing from Senior? To be honest, the reason why I used the excuse of settling accounts to keep Senior here is because Yanyu has a request." "You have a request?" Yu Qianqiu was startled, and his stomach twisted 7 or 8 times, suspecting that there was some kind of conspiracy. Suddenly, he pointed at Yin Baikong and laughed. "The owner of this place is right in front of you. If you want something, you're asking him. My ability is limited. I can't help you much." His hand that was grabbed retracted. "Beautiful women are good, but it's a big loss. Why did you drag me into this?" Yin Baikong was startled. Then he laughed and said, "Brother Niu is too modest. She hasn't even said what it is. How would Brother Niu know you can't help? Why don't you listen to her first? Then it won't be too late." He was also curious. A mere brothel madam actually dared to have ideas about Niu Yud. He wanted to see what she was up to. Chapter 600. Senior is wise. Yanyu smiled and saluted Yin Baikong. Even though Yin Baikong was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't help but feel a bit absent-minded. There was such a beautiful woman in his territory, and he didn't even know about it. The people watching from both sides of the street secretly admired the lady boss. To be able to talk and laugh in front of 2 late-stage spirit-severing experts was not something an ordinary person could do. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the two and began to ponder. Could it be that these two had dug a pit for him to jump into? Thinking about it, he felt that it was very possible. Who knew what the relationship between these two was? He had long heard that Yin Baikong had many lovers, not to mention that they were in the same territory. Thus he smiled at Yanyu and said, "Let me say this first, my ability is limited. If I can't help, don't blame me for declining." He threw the spirit stones in his hand back into his storage pouch. Since the other party had already said that it wasn't for money, he had already shown his face with the top-grade spirit stones. It wasn't like he was rich. Yanyu coquettishly looked at him and covered her mouth as she laughed. "I heard that Senior is overflowing with talent. You once wrote a poem in the ghost manner that is still widely praised in the cultivation world. Yanyu also admires you greatly. Now that I finally have the chance to meet Senior, I naturally have to be thick-skinned and ask Senior to leave behind a poem." "Are you kidding me? What poem can I write? The rumors are wrong. I can't help you with this." Yu Qianqiu didn't even think about it, and immediately refused. He had already thought about it. No matter what it was, as long as the other party asked, he would immediately refuse. "Senior, how many pairs of eyes have seen it? Can you even deny this?" Yanyu was stunned. Seeing Yu Qianqiu shake his head, she couldn't help but look at Yin Baikong with a sad expression. In the end, Yin Baikong's index finger was greatly moved. What a rare beauty! Yin Baikong's eyebrows twitched and he laughed. "Brother Niu, you're quite good at evading this. You don't know that this matter is known to the whole world. You can't avoid it even if you want to. Borrowing Headmaster Yan's invitation, Brother Niu should consider it as giving me face. There is no harm in leaving behind a famous poem for my cornucopia." Sikongju could be considered to be someone who understood his master's nature. Seeing his master's actions, he couldn't help but look at Yanyu a few more times, taking note of her in his heart. In the future, even he wouldn't be able to provoke this woman. Yanyu didn't think that Yin Baikong would really speak up for her. After a moment of joy, a trace of worry flashed through her eyes as she vaguely guessed something. Then he looked at Niu Yud anxiously. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Yin Baikong actually dared to say such words. Then, he really couldn't refute Yin Baikong's words in front of everyone, at least not now. But how could he compose a poem? His eyes inadvertently fell on the signboard of the Spring Slumber Brothel, and a thought flashed through his mind. "I can compose a poem for you." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. His brain cells should not be wasted. His hand unknowingly wrapped around Yanyu's waist, and pinched her while he was at it. he whispered in her ear. But I can't do it for nothing. How are you going to repay me? Such an ambiguous action caused Yin Baikong's eyebrows to twitch a few times. Si Kongju looked at his master, then at Niu Yud. He was truly speechless. This matter was a little troublesome. Those who were paying attention to this side all secretly shook their heads. Sure enough, you can't judge a book by its cover. This Niu Yud was actually a pervert. Tianyi and the rest were even more speechless. Yanyu glanced at Yin Baikong from the corner of her eyes, then whispered to Yu Qianqiu. As long as Senior takes a liking to it, feel free to take it. Oh. Then let's find a chance to talk about repayment in private. Yu Qianqiu let go of her waist. Under everyone's gaze, he put his hands behind his back and pretended to stare at the spring slumber brothel. He really did look like he was about to start writing. I wonder how Brother Yin's handwriting is? Yu Qianqiu asked as he stared at the spring slumber brothel. To be honest, Yin Baikong was currently in a very bad mood. The meat that he wanted to take a bite of was snatched away by someone else in the blink of an eye. It would be strange if he was happy. However, he quickly adjusted his mood. It was just a woman. Moreover, it was a woman who came from a brothel. Compared to his great undertaking, it was really insignificant. There were many women in this world. It was not worth making a fuss with Niu Yud over such a woman. Yin Baikong had already guessed his plan. He smiled and said, although I can write a few words, I'm afraid I can't compare to Brother Niu's overflowing talent. Let's do it in this spring slumber brothel. I leave a poem and you leave a word. We'll work together and leave a beautiful story in the cultivation world. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu casually said. He said it casually, but Yin Baikong took it to heart, especially when he said let's work together. It made him smile widely, and he replied with deep meaning. All right, that's exactly what I was thinking. Unbeknownst to him, Yu Qianqiu did it because his words were not good enough. Otherwise, why would Yin Baikong be in the limelight for such a flashy event? Yu Qianqiu faced the spring slumber brothel with his hands behind his back. He nodded and immediately recited without hesitation. Spring sleeps without knowing the dawn. Everywhere I hear birds singing. The wind and rain come at night. How many flowers fall? After reciting, he turned to look at Yin Baikong and nodded slightly. That's it. Yin Baikong was stunned. He silently pondered for a moment before raising his hand and pointing at the slanted wall at the entrance of the spring slumber brothel. His 2 fingers trembled fiercely. Chi-chi. The stone wall a few meters away flew into the air. In the blink of an eye, 4 large words appeared. Each word was vigorous and forceful, as if carved by a knife or axe. Overall, it looked like a dancing dragon and a dancing phoenix. It was indeed beautiful. At the same time, it also showed Yin Baikong's profound cultivation. These words were not directly drawn by qi. Instead, wherever the qi went, the stones around the word shattered, causing each word to stand out on the wall. To be able to control the hardness and softness of qi to such an extent, and to do it from a distance, it was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could do. The World Commerce Chamber of Commerce disciples all revealed proud expressions. The others were secretly shocked. As expected of a late-stage soul formation expert. Damn it! What's there to be proud of when I tell you to write a few words? Are you afraid that others don't know you're a late-stage soul formation expert? Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart but praised. Brother Yin, your words are really good. You flatter me. Yin Baikong laughed and then asked. Do you have a name for the poem? Let's call it. Yu Qianqiu looked at the Spring Slumber Brothel's signboard and chuckled. Let's call it Spring Slumber Brothel. This person is really. Yin Baikong shook his head without saying anything. He raised his hand and with a few swishing sounds, the 3 words Spring Slumber Brothel appeared in a bigger font. Thank you, seniors. Yin Yu bowed. Although she said it sincerely, it was a little insincere because she didn't see anything good about the poem, and thought Niu Yud was just brushing her off. She recited. Spring sleeps without knowing the dawn. Everywhere I hear the singing birds. The wind and rain come at night, how many flowers fall. When she read the second line, she sensed a bit of ambiguity and couldn't help but roll her eyes at Niu Yud. The last 2 lines made people's imaginations roam. To be honest, Baikong didn't see anything special before, but after Yin Yu recited it, and then looked at the Spring Slumber Brothel's signboard, he suddenly had an expression of realization. He cheerfully said to Yu Qianqiu, "Brother Niu is indeed overflowing with talent. This poem is truly wondrous to the extreme." Yu Qianqiu chuckled and came over to put his arm around Yin Yu's waist, saying, "I'll keep the poem. I'll come ask for payment when I have time." After saying that, he laughed and left. He gestured to Baikong, and the two of them led the group of people away. Yin Yu looked at Niu Yud's departing figure with a sense of loss and murmured, "He's a romantic scholar." As soon as they left, a large group of people appeared from the shops on both sides of the street and crowded outside the Spring Slumber Brothel. In an instant, the place was packed with people competing to see the masterpiece left behind by two late-stage soul formation cultivators. In the distance, there were still people coming after hearing the news. Good poem, it really is a good poem. As expected of Senior Niu's masterpiece, the more I look at it, the more interesting it becomes. A person rubbed his hands and laughed lewdly, occasionally glancing at the Spring Slumber Brothel and the poem. He couldn't help but touch the storage pouch on his waist, clenched his teeth, and entered the Spring Slumber Brothel. There was no lack of dull people in the crowd. Seeing the strange smiles on everyone's faces, they couldn't understand it, so they shamelessly asked their friend beside them, "What's so funny?" Their friend laughed wickedly and pointed at the Spring Slumber Brothel. "All the mysteries can be solved in the Spring Slumber Brothel." "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go in and take a look." That person couldn't wait to pull his friend along. His friend grabbed him and laughed. "Spring sleeps without knowing the dawn, birds chirping everywhere, the wind and rain come at night, who knows how many flowers have fallen. Hee. Now is not the time, come back at night. I guarantee you that after a night, you will understand the meaning of these 4 lines. A young cultivator flipped the poem over and over several times. Seeing his senior martial brother beside him was laughing lewdly, he couldn't help but ask, "Senior martial brother, this poem is very simple. I don't see anything good about it." Snickers came from the side. Then someone said, "Xiao Lu, take your junior martial brother and leave. Senior Niu's poem is very profound. You won't be able to understand it until you're old enough." The surrounding people immediately laughed. Xiao Lu hurriedly grabbed his junior martial brother and ran away. After squeezing out of the crowd, he immediately scolded his junior martial brother. "What do you know at such a young age? How dare you talk about Senior Niu's masterpiece? Go back to the shop." "Senior martial brother, where are you going?" the junior martial brother asked. Xiao Lu, who was about to squeeze back into the crowd, glared and said, "I'm going to read Senior Niu's poem again, then I'll go back later, you go first." In front of the Spring Slumber Brothel, the crowd didn't disperse for a long time. However, it was full, and there was actually a long queue outside. Yin Yu sneered at the sight, silently cursing that all men were bad. She immediately ordered someone to draw up a new notice board and hang it up. The price was tripled. Immediately, complaints came from all directions, but now that the Spring Slumber Brothel was more confident, and the lady boss had an ambiguous relationship with Niu Yud, who dared to cause trouble here, it was more like courting death. The World Commerce Chamber of Commerce took special care of the Spring Slumber Brothel, even sending a law enforcement team to stand guard here. Although there were complaints, there were still some curious people who didn't give up and refused to return. In the end, the long queue wasn't scared off by the high price. It was so noisy that the business of the nearby restaurants immediately became popular. Chapter 601. At the foot of God of Wealth Peak, Tianyi and the others stayed behind. The 2 main characters didn't ask for anyone's company and headed up the mountain. Baikong, who had just reached the peak, saw Yu Qianqiu's late arrival. He looked at the flying sword and asked in confusion, "Brother Niu, what do you mean?" "I'm currently cultivating a sword technique, so I often use the sword as a substitute for walking." Yu Qianqiu's words were a little mysterious. Baikong nodded. Since it was a secret regarding the other party's cultivation, it wasn't good to ask further. Wind and clouds were drifting on the mountain peak. A not too big nor too luxurious palace appeared cold and cheerless. On the signboard were the words Hall of Wealth. Outside the palace was a green stone slab with a pine tree beside it. Looking at the sea and clouds from this place really gave one a feeling of transcendence. Yu Qianqiu surveyed the surroundings, and he couldn't help but click his tongue as he looked at the mountain range that was covered in floating clouds and auspicious clouds. It really is a blessed land. Brother Yin really knows how to pick a place. Brother Niu is overpraising me. Compared to Brother Niu's blessed land, there is still a gap. Oh right. Yin Baikong was puzzled. Where does Brother Niu live? Why haven't I heard of Brother Niu's name before? With Brother Niu's cultivation, you shouldn't be a nobody in the cultivation world. Could it be that I'm ignorant? It was time to get to the main topic. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and shook his head. It's not that Brother Yin is ignorant. It's just that you've never been to the place I come from. The place I've never been to? Yin Baikong's eyes flickered as he pondered. If there's a place I haven't been to in this world, it would be the eastern sacred lands and dense fog forest. Could it be that Brother Niu comes from one of these two? Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said, the latter. Dense fog forest? Yin Baikong was shocked. To be more precise, I only came from dense fog forest. I'm not from there. Yu Qianqiu smiled meaningfully. Brother Niu, I don't quite understand what you're trying to say. Could you elaborate a little more? Yin Baikong's eyes flickered. Yu Qianqiu was not in a hurry to reply. He took out a golden robe from his storage bag and slowly put it on. After tidying himself up a little, his entire temperament became arrogant. Standing at the peak of the mountain, his golden robe shone with golden light under the sun. After that, he took out a simple and unadorned treasured sword. The tip of the sword was pointed at the ground, and both his hands were placed on his abdomen, supporting the hilt. He looked into the distance silently, his expression solemn and respectful. Yin Baikong squinted his eyes. He could immediately tell that the golden robe was extraordinary. He had been in the World Chamber of Commerce for so many years and had seen countless things. There was almost no refining material in the world that he did not recognize. However, he couldn't tell what material this golden robe was made of. Especially when he looked at the treasured sword. His pupils suddenly shrank. The patterns on the treasured sword were simple and unadorned, and he seemed to have seen similar patterns in the fragmented ancient texts. With his eyesight and cultivation, he could tell at a glance that this treasured sword contained immense power. Its quality was definitely not inferior to a high-grade spirit treasure. He really wanted to release his divine sense to check the golden robe and treasured sword. But doing so without permission was taboo in the cultivation world. The other party could take it as a provocation. Then again, if it was someone with a lower cultivation than him, he would not hesitate to forcefully check it. However, this person was Niu Yud, whose cultivation was no weaker than his. Just based on the fact that he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation, he could prove this point. Brother Niu, what are you doing? Yin Baikong asked in confusion. Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at him and said indifferently, there is an immortal ascension stage in the fog forest. On the immortal ascension stage hangs an immortal ascension horn. Any cultivator whose cultivation has broken through to the late stage of soul formation can head to the immortal ascension stage and blow the immortal ascension horn. An envoy from the celestial world will descend and bring them to the celestial world. Some time ago, a young man called Yu Qianqiu barged into the immortal ascension stage and blew the immortal ascension horn by mistake. This envoy was summoned here. Yin Baikong was dumbfounded. There really was an immortal ascension stage in the fog forest. He was actually the envoy from the celestial world. Yin Baikong's mind was in a daze as he listened to the other party continue. Who knew that this Yu Qianqiu's cultivation hadn't even reached the soul formation stage, let alone the late stage of soul formation? What nonsense! In a fit of anger, this envoy wanted to kill him, but I was also curious. With his cultivation, how could he barge into the fog forest? Who knew that even he couldn't figure it out? Thus, I left the misty forest to investigate the cause of this matter. If I don't figure it out, what if anyone could barge into the fog forest and blow the immortal ascension horn? Wouldn't that be a joke? At this point, Yu Qianqiu's expression became indifferent. He turned to look at Yin Baikong and asked, "Brother Yin, where do you think I came from?" Yin Baikong swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He didn't know how to answer. After listening to Niu Yud's words and thinking about what happened during this period of time, he felt that all the fog had been lifted. No wonder he had never heard of Niu Yud in the cultivation world. With such a high cultivation, it was impossible for him to not show his face in the cultivation world. No wonder Niu Yud only appeared in the cultivation world after Yu Qianqiu barged into the fog forest. It turned out that Niu Yud was accidentally lured here by that rascal Yu Qianqiu. No wonder Niu Yud didn't put any experts in the cultivation world in his eyes. With his identity as an envoy from the celestial world, did he need to be afraid of cultivators from the cultivation world? There was also the restriction-breaking pill that could forcefully increase one's cultivation, and the top-grade spirit stone that he casually threw down the mountain. This series of events all showed that he had an extraordinary background. Looking at the ancient sword with extraordinary power, and the golden robe shining with a golden glow, Yin Baikong was completely convinced, but it was still hard for him to accept it. The person standing in front of him was actually an immortal from the celestial world? The story of immortals descending to the human world only existed in legends. He didn't expect to see it in person. It was really unimaginable. Brother Niu. Yin Baikong felt that this title was a bit awkward. He didn't know if it was appropriate to call him that now. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and put away his sword. He took off his golden robe and put it away as well. Then he said, "Brother Yin, don't worry about it. You and I will continue as before. However, I have to say one thing first. Regarding my identity, you can't tell anyone else. Other than you, only Yu Qianqiu knows my identity. However, I've already warned that brat. He won't reveal it. I can't wait to block the news of such a good thing. Why would I tell anyone else?" Yin Baikong hid the surprise in his heart and forcefully maintained his poise. He nodded and said, "Brother Niu, don't worry. I won't tell anyone else about your identity." "Oh right." Yin Baikong seemed to suddenly remember something. He frowned and asked, "Brother Niu, do you still remember the matter with Yan Juixing? I'm ashamed to say that I doubted Brother Niu before. But now, I'm completely convinced. I want to ask Brother Niu, what's going on with that Yan Juixing?" Hee. "I've also heard about the matter of you guys chasing after Yan Juixing. I was just casually mentioning it. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. As for whether people believe me or not, what does that have to do with me? However, there's one thing that's beyond doubt." Yu Qianqiu said with a solemn expression, "That Yan Juixing's cultivation technique is not simple. I didn't expect there to be such a tyrannical cultivation technique in the human world. I'm really surprised. If it wasn't for the fact that my cultivation technique is special, and that I've been restricted in the immortal world to a certain extent, making it unsuitable for me to change to another cultivation technique, I would have personally captured that kid and studied him carefully. That's strange. Brother Niu's eyes are definitely not wrong. However, Bing Qingzi actually dared to make a false oath. Isn't he afraid of retribution?" Yin Baikong was puzzled. "I've heard about it. To be honest, I can't figure it out either." Yu Qianqiu pondered and said, "Could it be that this cultivation technique is more powerful than I imagined? That it can make people protect it even at the risk of retribution? No, there should be other reasons. How could there be such a heaven-defying cultivation technique in the human world? Otherwise, the immortal world wouldn't just sit and watch." Yin Baikong's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. He then asked tentatively, "Could it be that there's some heaven-defying cultivation technique in the human world that even the immortal world knows about? Could it be that you think Yan Juixing can create some heaven-defying cultivation technique?" Yu Qianqiu asked in reply. He then snorted and said, "In the ancient times, there were some heaven-defying figures in this world. They almost changed the immortal world's dynasty. However, they were still exterminated in the end. Everything that should be destroyed has been destroyed. It's impossible for any heaven-defying cultivation technique to be left behind." "That's not necessarily true. There are no absolutes in everything." Yin Baikong felt his heart beating faster. There was actually someone in this world who almost changed the immortal world's dynasty? Suppressing his emotions, he said calmly, since the immortal world has already exterminated them, there shouldn't be any more. Brother Niu doesn't need to worry. I will think of a way to investigate that Yin Juexing. If there's anything, I will inform Brother Niu. Yes. Investigate properly. Investigate Yin Juexing to death. I have confidence in the power of your World Commerce Association. Don't waste my efforts. Yu Qianqiu nodded and changed the topic. Brother Yin, I wonder if you've prepared the remaining 800 million high-grade spirit stones? Yin Baikong felt his heart ache. He forced a smile and said, I promise Brother Niu. Naturally, I won't go back on my word. However, there's one thing I don't know. Brother Niu is the immortal world's envoy. Do you still lack spirit stones? Brother Yin might not know. Spirit stones are also used in the immortal world. Yu Qianqiu suddenly shook his head and sighed. Brother Yin, don't think that being the immortal world's envoy is so great. It's really nothing in the immortal world. I'm ashamed. Hee. Brother Niu is too humble. Yin Baikong's words were pleasant to hear. However, he was coldly snorting in his heart. It would be strange if an errand boy from the immortal world could be anything. Not long after he said that, Sikongju came over with a few storage bags. Yin Baikong took the storage bags and waved his hand to dismiss Sikongju. He then handed the storage bags to Yu Qianqiu. The latter naturally accepted it without hesitation. Brother Niu, when will the limit-breaking pill be refined? Yin Baikong asked. Chapter 602. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood after the windfall, so he casually said, Limit-breaking pill? I've never refined anything like that before, I don't know how to do it. Yin Baikong's face stiffened, then turned green. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with hatred. Brother Niu, you're not joking, right? If it weren't for his cultivation and identity, Yin Baikong would have tortured this guy to death already. Yu Qianqiu turned to look at his expression and was slightly stunned. Then he laughed. Brother Yin, don't misunderstand, I really don't know how to refine pills, but that doesn't mean I can't get limit-breaking pills. As long as you have spirit stones, I can get you as many as you want, I'm just afraid you don't have enough money. Hearing this, Yin Baikong's expression softened. Then he pointed at the sky suspiciously. Could it be that Brother Niu is saying that you can get limit-breaking pills from the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu nodded. I'll be honest with Brother Yin, I hope Brother Yin can keep this a secret. Of course. Yin Baikong looked forward to his next words. To tell you the truth, limit-breaking pills are treasures here, but in the immortal world, they aren't considered high-level spirit pills. Although I don't know how to refine them, there are many people in the immortal world who can. As long as you have spirit stones, you can hire someone to refine them. I've said it before, I'm a bit tight on money in the immortal world. But as a guide, other immortals don't have the convenience of being able to descend to the mortal world as they wish. But I can. Yu Qianqiu winked at him. Brother Yin is a smart person. I'm sure you understand what I mean. Oh. Wonderful, wonderful. Yin Baikong suddenly understood and clapped his hands. He really did understand. Other immortals in the immortal world couldn't descend to the mortal world as they wished. But this Niu Yud, as a guide, could travel between the immortal world and the mortal world. Moreover, Niu Yud said he was tight on money. This guy wanted to sell limit-breaking pills in the immortal world to earn spirit stones in the mortal world. It seems Brother Yin understands what I mean. Yu Qianqiu laughed. Understood, completely understood. It was only human nature. I'm also from a business background. It's good that there's money to be made. Yin Baikong's face was full of smiles as he rubbed his hands together in excitement. What a joke. Since this Niu Yud was able to obtain a limit-breaking pill from the immortal world, he should be able to obtain something else. This is really too wonderful. The heavens are really helping me. The reason why I caused such a commotion in the ghost manor was because I wanted to see who in the cultivation world has the strongest financial resources. Yu Qianqiu winked at Yin Baikong with a sinister smile and said, I've long heard that the World Commerce Association has the deepest financial resources. I didn't expect it to be so. With such a wealthy partner, things will be much easier to cooperate with. Brother Ox, you're right. I like it. It's better to have more financial resources when doing business. Yin Baikong patted his chest and said, I don't dare to say anything else in the cultivation world, but when it comes to financial strength, if my world commerce says it's number 2, no one would dare to say they're number 1. Good. Yu Qianqiu praised him 3 times and said, So you're saying that I didn't choose the wrong person to cooperate with? No. I guarantee that Brother Ox will not find a more suitable person than me in the cultivation world. Yin Baikong said with certainty. Yu Qianqiu moved his head over and said softly, It's fine as long as you know this. Don't let other people hear about it, in case there's an accident. Of course. Yin Baikong finished speaking. The two of them looked at each other, and suddenly burst into laughter. Their laughter was very happy, as if their schemes had succeeded. One was racking his brains to ruthlessly tear off a big piece of fat from the World Commerce Association. The other was thinking of how to get something good from the immortal world through the other party. Both of them were scheming. In reality, both of them were people who wouldn't get up early without benefits. Neither of them were good people. Oh right, Brother Ox? Yin Baikong asked. I don't know when you can get the limit-breaking pill from the immortal world. To be honest, I also want to see the miraculous effects of this pill. I want to broaden my horizons. Although he believed in Niu Yud's background, he had always been careful. Some things naturally had to be seen to be believed. It was impossible for him to believe whatever Niu Yud said. If that was the case, he wouldn't be Yin Baikong. He had to at least verify it. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart, and pretended not to understand what he meant. He raised his hand and took out the bracelet on his wrist. After injecting his divine sense into it, he frowned and muttered, Li Qiuxiang is only at the late stage of foundation establishment. She needs 7 pills to reach the early stage of tribulation passing. Amano is at the middle stage of nascent soul, and needs 2 pills. The other 2 guys need 3 pills each. That's a total of 15 pills. There's still 2 left. The bracelet flickered and 2 red lights flashed into Yu Qianqiu's palm. He handed over the 2 red pills and said, There are still 15 pills left. I have to leave them for the guys who just accepted them. Brother Yin, these 2 pills are for you to broaden your horizons. When I return to the immortal world, I'll get you another batch. Just from the pill halo, I can tell that it's good stuff. Normal people don't have such superb refining skills. As expected of a pill refined in the immortal world. Yin Baikong held the pills and sighed. The pill halo was like a treasure, it was truly attractive. Then he looked down the mountain in silence. Not long after, he saw Sikongju carrying a person in each of his hands. Sikongju bowed and said, Master Senior Niu. 1 early stage foundation establishment disciple, and 1 early stage core formation disciple. Greetings, Ancestor. The 2 disciples said in fear. They didn't know why they were caught by Sikongju and brought to the God of Wealth Peak. Normally, they didn't have the qualifications to come to this place, especially when they saw the mountain guarding Ancestor. No need to be nervous. Yin Baikong smiled wholeheartedly and raised his hand. Then he opened his palm and 2 red pills appeared in his palm. He said to Sikongju, these are 2 limit-breaking pills. Let them see their effects. These are limit-breaking pills? Sikongju's eyes lit up. He took the 2 pills and couldn't help but praise. Tisk. What superb refining skills, there's actually pill halo. Yin Baikong and Niu Yud looked at each other, and smiled with tacit understanding. Sikongju was happy when he saw his master's smile. It seemed that his master and Niu Yud's private conversation had a very satisfactory result. Otherwise, they wouldn't be smiling so happily. Also, the 2 of them seemed to have reached some sort of tacit understanding. Sikongju opened the pills in his hands and said, You 2 have the chance to try the limit-breaking pills first. Hurry up and thank Ancestor and Senior Niu. Naturally, the 2 disciples had heard of the limit-breaking pill. It was a panacea that was widely known in the cultivation world. It was said that it could quickly increase a person's cultivation. When they saw that the 2 pills had a pill halo that they had never seen before, they were even more surprised. They didn't think that this benefit would fall into their hands. Thus, they repeatedly thanked Yin Baikong and Niu Yud. Yin Baikong gestured for Sikongju to begin. The latter then asked Yu Qianqiu, Senior Niu, I heard that it needs to be used with spirit stones? Of course. Without sufficient spirit energy, how can they increase their cultivation for no reason? How can there be such a good thing? Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. Their cultivation is still shallow. They won't need that many spirit stones. Under Yu Qianqiu's guidance, the two disciples took the pills and sat down cross-legged. Sikongju immediately poured out a large pile of spirit stones between them. Not long after, the two disciples' bodies turned red. They seemed to be unbearably hot. They immediately followed the instructions and grabbed the spirit stones on the ground to absorb the spirit energy to cool down. A few hours later, their expressions returned to normal, and they stopped absorbing the spirit stones. When they opened their eyes one after another, their eyes were filled with unconcealable joy. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Based on the three's cultivation, they could tell that the two disciples' cultivation had indeed increased by one level. Yin Baikong signaled Sikongju with his eyes. The latter moved in a flash and grabbed the two disciples' wrists. He then silently checked their body conditions. There's nothing wrong with their bodies. Their cultivation has also increased by one level. The limit-breaking pill truly lives up to its name. Sikongju hinted to his master that there were no problems. Yin Baikong's face revealed a smile, and he gestured for him to bring the two disciples down. Sikongju quickly collected the remaining spirit stones on the ground and grabbed the two disciples who were still excited to go down the mountain. Early-stage foundation establishment used more than 100 high-grade spirit stones. Early-stage core formation used more than 3,000. It seems that depending on the level of cultivation, the amount of spirit stones absorbed is also different. Yin Baikong turned his head and said, Brother Niu, am I right? Correct. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile. Hee. I've really broadened my horizons today. I didn't think there would be such a miraculous spirit pill. Yin Baikong was filled with joy as he sighed. Broaden my ass. He was just worried that there was a problem with the spirit pill and wanted to find someone to test it out. Old fox. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. However, on the surface, he didn't care and said, This kind of spirit pill is nothing in the immortal world. There are many more miraculous ones. It's just that they are expensive. That's natural. There are many good things in the immortal world. Yin Baikong rubbed his hands and laughed. He thought that he shouldn't be too hasty. He should take it step by step. His gaze suddenly stopped on Yu Qianqiu's bracelet. He pointed at it in surprise and said, I saw Brother Niu take something out from it earlier. Could it be that this bracelet has a storage space? Oh. Yu Qianqiu took off the bracelet on his wrist and handed it to Yin Baikong. That's right. This thing is similar to the storage pouch here. However, there are 10 storage spaces inside. Its capacity is much larger than the storage pouch. Yin Baikong was taken aback. He didn't expect Huang Xiaolong to show it to him. Receiving the bracelet, Huang Xiaolong injected his divine sense into it and found that there were indeed 10 storage spaces inside, arranged in a ring shape on the bracelet. He immediately clicked his tongue. Not bad, not bad. This is indeed a good thing, worthy of being an item from the immortal world. Based on the cultivation world's refining standards, a bracelet can't contain so many storage spaces. However, he was a little disappointed. There weren't many things inside the bracelet. No wonder Huang Xiaolong would show it to him. Suppressing the joy in his heart, Huang Xiaolong returned the bracelet. If it's convenient for Brother Niu, why don't you help me buy one from the immortal world? Then he added, How many spirit stones do I need? A businessman's natural instincts were hard to change. Yu Qianqiu snickered inwardly. Putting the bracelet back on his wrist, he nonchalantly said, That's easy, 3 divine-grade spirit stones are enough. Chapter 603. Divine grade spirit stone? The muscles on Yin Baikong's face twitched uncontrollably. It was hard to tell what expression he was wearing. The dignified late-stage spirit-severing expert asked weakly, Brother Niu, Are you talking about divine-grade spirit stones? I didn't hear wrongly, right? AI. Look at me, I keep forgetting about this. Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead, a wry smile on his face. I forgot this is the mortal world, not the immortal world. Where would divine-grade spirit stones come from? He patted the storage bag hanging at his waist, and a black shadow flickered out. 2 fingers clamped together, like a magic trick. The black light flickered between his fingers. Yin Baikong's eyes were glued to the black light, but Niu Yid flicked his finger, and a crisp ding sound rang out as a black shadow shot towards him. Yin Baikong caught the black light, and in his palm was something that looked exactly like a spirit stone, but it was a black color that he had never seen before. The black luster exuded an alluring allure. Lightly clenching his fist, Yin Baikong inserted his divine sense into the black light, and immediately felt the majestic spiritual energy contained within. It was hard to believe that such a small piece of black light could contain so much spiritual energy. Divine-grade spirit stone, it really is the legendary divine-grade spirit stone. Yin Baikong muttered under his breath, looking at the black light in his palm. A faint trace of excitement rose in his heart. Not to mention divine-grade spirit stones, he had never even seen a top-grade spirit stone before. It was only rumored that a top-grade spirit stone had appeared in an auction in China's cultivation world. Who would have thought that he would be able to see a divine-grade spirit stone today? Despite his wealth, he couldn't restrain his excitement. As the person in charge of the world's largest business organization, his knowledge was extensive, but the things that Niu Yid took out today struck him again and again. They were all good things that he had never seen before. It made him feel like he was a frog in a well, so ignorant. At this point, the last trace of doubt in his heart was dispelled. He completely believed that Niu Yid really came from the immortal world. Otherwise, how could there be so many things that couldn't be seen in the mortal world? Little did he know, this was exactly what Yu Qianqiu was hoping for. Brother Yin, I'm short on money. I only have 1 piece. Yu Qianqiu reminded him as he hooked his finger at the thing in Yin Baikong's hand. Oh. Yin Baikong came to his senses, and reluctantly returned the divine-grade spirit stone to Niu Yid, watching helplessly as Niu Yid stuffed the spirit stone into his storage bag. A piece of divine-grade spirit stone can be exchanged for 100 million high-grade spirit stones. In other words, a storage bracelet is worth 300 million high-grade spirit stones, Yu Qianqiu said. 300 million top-rank spirit stones? Yin Baikong was taken aback for a second, then said in disbelief, so expensive? At this price, a storage bag with the capacity of 3 rooms can buy 100 million of them. There's something you don't know. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. Let me tell you this. In the immortal world, divine-grade spirit stones were widely used, just like the high-grade spirit stones here. Top-grade spirit stones were like mid-grade spirit stones, and high-grade spirit stones were like low-grade spirit stones. Those immortal world's experts, with their cultivation, would find it troublesome and slow to absorb spiritual energy from top-grade spirit stones. Most of them would absorb spiritual energy from divine-grade spirit stones. Take Brother Yin for example. If you absorb spiritual energy, would you take out a pile of low-grade spirit stones? I wouldn't. Yin Baikong shook his head. I only use high-grade spirit stones. I'm too lazy to even use mid-grade spirit stones. That's why I said it. It's the same principle. Yu Qianqiu laughed heartily. The immortal world's prices are indeed a little too high if we look at it from the perspective of this world. But in the immortal world, everyone is used to it. Brother Niu, don't say any more, I understand. Forget about the storage bracelet, it's not worth it to buy one. I'll just use a storage bag to store things. Yin Baikong smiled bitterly, then suddenly frowned, asking doubtfully, according to Brother Niu, how much is a limit-breaking pill worth in the immortal world? Limit-breaking pills are very cheap in the immortal world. The price-to-performance ratio is as common as the energy-restoring pills here. Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly, one limit-breaking pill costs 90 peak-grade spirit stones. I'm going to sell it for 100 peak-grade spirit stones, and earn 10 peak-grade spirit stones for each pill. Yin Baikong sucked in a breath of cold air, dumbfounded. Using high-grade spirit stones as the price, in other words, Each pill costs 1 million top-grade spirit stones. Brother Ian thinks it's too expensive? Yu Qianqiu's brows furrowed. How about this? I'm a little short on money these days. Lend me your 1 billion first. I'll sell a batch of limit-breaking pills later. Anyway, the cornucopia gathering is about to begin. 1 billion can be exchanged for more than 1,000 limit-breaking pills. I believe the several hundred forces in the cultivation world will have no problem buying these limit-breaking pills. Ah, you want to sell the limit-breaking pills to the countries? Yin Baikong was a little dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, kept his head down and continued to calculate. I believe a country can take out 100 million top-grade spirit stones without a problem. More than 300 countries can be exchanged for more than 30 billion. One limit-breaking pill is worth 1 million. I can earn 100,000 per pill. 30 billion, I can make a difference of 3 billion. This is the most conservative estimate of the purchasing power. 5 billion is not a problem. Also, there is the richest cultivation world, China. There are many sects there. There are many sects that can take out 1 billion. I can make a big profit. The more he calculated, the more excited he became. In the end, he couldn't help but smile. Brother Ian, your 1 billion top-grade spirit stones. I promise I can easily return it to you in less than a month. Lend me 1 billion for a month. When the time comes, I promise to return it on time. What do you think? At most, I'll give you interest. Ian Baikong looked at him speechlessly, thinking to himself, if you make the other forces strong with the limit-breaking pills, then will my world commerce still have a foothold? Think about it. All the country's forces are at least at the tribulation stage. Only the world commerce is mixed. I'm afraid it won't be long before many forces want to replace the world commerce. Then what's the point? What? Yu Qianqiu was a little unhappy. Brother Ian, don't you want to lend me the money? If you don't want to, then forget it. I'll return it to you now. I'll talk to the other forces. If it doesn't work, I'll just use the money I have on me to do it a few more times. But let me say this first. Even if business is not done, I'll still be righteous. Don't reveal my identity and background, in case we turn against each other. As soon as he finished speaking, he reached into his storage bag and took out something, as if it was real. Brother Nyo, don't misunderstand. I didn't mean it that way. Yin Baikong didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he pressed down on his hand, smiling bitterly. It's not what you think. What I mean is, I'll eat 1,000 limit-breaking pills worth 1 billion high-grade spirit stones, so you don't have to sell them anymore. When he said this, his heart twitched. Logically speaking, one limit-breaking pill was worth 1 million high-grade spirit stones. Judging from its proper value, it wasn't expensive, and it was worth it. Of course, this was only for him. If he used it himself, with such a miraculous effect, one pill wouldn't be too expensive even if it was 100 million. But if he wanted to use it on a large scale, it would be an astronomical figure. A very large figure. And it was ridiculously expensive. But the key was that he didn't need the limit-breaking pill. He just wanted to buy it to raise the cultivation of the people in the world commerce. If he wanted to buy 10,000 pills, he would need 10 billion. But the number of disciples in the world commerce was far more than 10,000. And not everyone could reach the tribulation stage with one pill. There were many people who needed a few pills. In addition, after every disciple took the limit-breaking pill, they would need a large number of spirit stones to help raise their cultivation. At that time, the consumption of spirit stones would be quite terrifying. And even the world commerce, the richest in the world, would find it hard to bear. But then again, he had no choice but to buy it. If a large number of limit-breaking pills fell into the hands of other powers, it would definitely not be a good thing for the world commerce. It might even bring disaster to the world commerce. Rather than being destroyed, it was better to temporarily feel the pinch. In the long run, the temporary pinch was worth it. As long as the overall strength of the world commerce rose to the next level, the wealth would naturally come rolling in. You want all 1,000 limit-breaking pills worth 1 billion? Yu Qianqiu said in shock. That's right. Yin Baikong gritted his teeth and nodded. At first, he thought that Niu Yud knew how to refine pills, and also thought that his cultivation was inferior to his, so he planned to recruit Niu Yud as his subordinate. Who would have thought that this guy's background was so incredible? He was actually a guide from the immortal world, and his cultivation was higher than his. Damn it. He couldn't scold him, he couldn't hit him, and he had to deal with him carefully. It was really unbearable. This guy had nothing better to do. Wasn't it better to stay in the immortal world? Why did he have to come to the human world? It wasn't as if you had less trouble. No, the main culprit was that damned Wuxia. If it wasn't for that bastard, how could this immortal descend to the human world? Baikong gnashed his teeth in hatred. The world commerce is indeed rich. Wuxia gave a thumbs up and praised, but then he shook his head and said, Brother Ian, I'm really sorry, I can't let you eat all of them. Baikong was shocked. Why? Isn't it the same no matter who you sell it to? You'll make money either way, sell it to the world commerce in one go, and you won't have to go through the trouble. No, it's completely different. Wuxia waved his hand. Think about it. I already owe you $1 billion. If I sell the limit-breaking pill to you, you won't have to pay, then I won't have much liquid capital. Selling it to someone else is different. I can pre-order a batch in the immortal world. After the limit-breaking pill is sold, I can immediately return to the immortal world with spirit stones. This way, I can sell it again and again. The compound interest is very impressive. If I give it all to you, it will cut off a lot of my liquid capital. I won't be able to earn a lot. It really isn't worth it. Baikong was dumbfounded. He realized that Niu Yud was more suited to doing business than him. He really had a business mind. The compound interest was coming out. He was stunned for a while. He really didn't know what to say. Chapter 604. Brother Niu, how many limit-breaking pills do you think you can get from the immortal world? Baikong gritted his teeth. Old bastard. Finally thought it through? Wuxia rejoiced inwardly and said solemnly, several tens of thousands can be obtained, right? If I make too many, I'm afraid it'll be too conspicuous and attract the attention of others in the immortal world. But then again, it's not very possible to get tens of thousands at once. I don't dare to be so ostentatious. I reckon that the first batch should be able to get 10,000 without a problem. As for the follow-up, I'll have to wait for 1.5 years. Safety first. However, I have limited spirit stones on hand. It'll be difficult to get 10,000, so I can only get 1,000 first and repeat a few more times. Tens of thousands? Baikong was quite shocked and his face darkened. After hesitating for a while, he suddenly raised his head and said, Brother Niu, I'll eat the first 10,000. Wuxia was laughing inside, but on the surface he asked in surprise, Brother Ian, don't joke around. 10,000 limit-breaking pills are worth 10 billion high-grade spirit stones. Can you eat that many? Brother Niu, don't worry about this. I'll think of a way. I won't forget the money. Also, I'll eat the next tens of thousands. Baikong said in a deep voice. His face revealed a murderous and decisive aura, as if he had made an important decision. Wuxia's eyes narrowed. This time, he was really shocked, extremely shocked. Baikong actually wanted to eat tens of thousands of limit-breaking pills. His tone was too big. If it was 50,000 limit-breaking pills, wouldn't he have to take out 50 billion high-grade spirit stones? Was the World Commerce Association really that rich? Brother Ian, you're not joking, right? That's a few hundred billion. Don't make fun of me. Wuxia's expression was somewhat cold. I'll pay first and take the goods later. Is there anything Brother Niu is worried about? Baikong's expression didn't look like he was joking. Wuxia's heart thumped wildly. He was already imagining himself rolling around on a pile of tens of billions of high-grade spirit stones. However, Baikong continued, But I have a condition. I hope Brother Ox can agree to it. Damn it. As expected, there was no such thing as a free lunch. Wuxia complained in his heart. I don't know what the condition is. Why don't you tell me first? Business is business, so I will speak frankly. Baikong said with a solemn face. Limit-breaking pills, however many you have, I will eat all of them. Moreover, I have to pay first before taking the goods. But Brother Niu, you have to promise not to sell it to anyone else, only to me. There was a conspiracy. There was definitely a conspiracy. Yu Qianqiu's brain spun a few times, but he couldn't figure out what Tong Yin Bai Kong wanted to do. He could not help chuckling and said, "Brother Yin, forgive me for being blunt, but I'm afraid you won't be able to use tens of thousands of restriction-breaking pills. Of course, it's not that you can't afford it. There is something you might not know, but I have to remind you so that you won't feel unhappy when the time comes." Yin Baikong looked like he had already made up his mind. He calmly nodded and said, "Brother Niu, please speak your mind. Since it's a piece of advice, I am all ears." Yu Qianqiu carefully observed the changes in Yin Baikong's expression and slowly said, "Limit-breaking pills can only help people increase their cultivation to the early stage of tribulation passing. After that, they are useless. For example, an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator would need one limit-breaking pill for every increase in cultivation level. All the way to the early stage of tribulation passing, they would need 9 limit-breaking pills. However, along with the consumption of spirit stones, from early stage foundation establishment to early stage of tribulation passing, they would need around 1.2 million high-grade spirit stones. In addition to the 9 limit-breaking pills worth 9 million high-grade spirit stones, they would need a total of more than 10 million high-grade spirit stones. Brother Yin, that's tens of thousands of limit-breaking pills. Can you really afford it?" To be honest, Yu Qianqiu believed that no matter how rich the World Commerce Association was, they would not be able to fork out so much money. It should be known that out of his close to 10,000 subordinates, more than half of them were still unable to break through to the early stage of tribulation passing. The main reason was that the consumption of spirit stones was too large. This was under the condition that the limit-breaking pills could be produced and used for free. The World Chamber of Commerce had so many disciples, and a limit-breaking pill costs 1 million high-grade spirit stones. If they were to casually raise half of the World Chamber of Commerce's disciples to the early stage of tribulation passing, they would need at least 100 billion high-grade spirit stones. And this was a low estimate. Yin Baikong silently pondered for a while, then raised his head and declared again, "I'll pay first, I'll take the goods later." The meaning behind his words was very clear. "Don't worry, I won't shortchange you. Fuck. The World Commerce Association was this rich?" Yu Qianqiu frowned slightly and said, "Since you and I are sincere in our cooperation, I can't just focus on the present and ignore the future. After all, there will definitely be opportunities for cooperation in the future. There's something I need to tell you. It's true that the limit-breaking pill can help people increase their cultivation, but it can't help people break through bottlenecks. For example, when breaking through from the late stage of foundation establishment to the early stage of core formation, a similar bottleneck cannot be broken through." Yin Baikong was stunned, then said in surprise, "That's not right. I heard that when Brother Niu was at Ghost Village, you helped 2 loose cultivators break through from the foundation establishment stage to the early stage of tribulation passing. Could the rumors be wrong?" No, the rumors are true." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, then took out a spirit pill from his storage pouch that was surrounded by a 7-colored halo and threw it to Yin Baikong, saying, "This pill is called 7 Treasures Pill." Before he could finish, he heard Yin Baikong say in surprise, "This is the legendary 7 Treasures Pill that can help people break through bottlenecks? Is it the 7 Treasures Pill whose main ingredient is the 7-colored Lingxi?" "That's right." Yu Qianqiu smiled. "Brother Yin is really knowledgeable. But this thing is similar to the limit-breaking pill. It's quite common in the Immortal realm. I used this thing at Ghost Village to help those 2 loose cultivators break through to the early stage of tribulation passing. However, it's only effective up to the tribulation passing stage. It has no effect on cultivators above the soul formation stage. Brother Yin, why don't you find someone to test the effects of the 7 Treasures Pill?" The Immortal realm is indeed the Immortal realm. Yin Baikong sighed, then immediately summoned Sikongju, who was waiting at the foot of the mountain. Not long after, Sikongju brought over another disciple who met the requirements. There were many disciples in the World Commerce Association, so finding a disciple who met the requirements was too easy. This disciple had been stuck at the late stage of nascent soul for a long time, unable to break through, and had been very distressed. He didn't expect to encounter such a good thing. Ancestor and Senior Niu, two peerless experts, personally bestowed him a spirit pill. When Sikongju saw the seven-colored seven treasures pill, he looked at his master who was smiling without saying a word. He thought to himself, "It seems like I've done a great service to be able to invite Niu Yid to the World Commerce Association. Master's mental state is quite good." After a while, the disciple sitting cross-legged trembled, and white steam came out of his body. When he opened his eyes, he immediately kowtowed to Yin Baikong and Yu Qianqiu. "Thank you, Ancestor. Thank you, Senior Niu." What a joke! The nascent soul stage and the tribulation passing stage were two completely different concepts. Once he broke through, it would be strange if he wasn't happy. Sikongju quickly checked his body's condition, then happily said, "Not bad, your body is fine. You've already broken through to the early stage of tribulation passing. As expected of the seven treasures pill." "You guys leave first, I still have something to discuss with Brother Niu. Without my summons, no one is allowed to disturb us. Sikongju, personally stand guard at the foot of the mountain. Remember, no one is allowed to disturb us." Yin Baikong warned again. "Yes." Sikongju respectfully bowed towards the two. At this moment, Niu Yid had become very, very important in his heart. Everything he discussed with Master had to be listed as the World Commerce Association's top secret, and absolutely could not be disturbed by anyone. After he left the mountain, he immediately mobilized dozens of tribulation passing stage experts, each bringing 7 or 8 tribulation passing stage disciples. They surrounded the foot of the god of wealth peak in the highest state of alert. He also gave a death order. No one was allowed to approach. If anyone dared to disobey, they would be killed without mercy. Such a state of panic immediately attracted the attention of many people. They didn't know what was happening on the God of Wealth Peak. They only knew that there were 2 soul formation final stage experts on the God of Wealth Peak at the moment. Jing Yuankong didn't like Senior Brother's order that no one was allowed to approach, because if anyone included him, it would have a significant impact on his prestige in the cornucopia. Although he didn't say anything, he found an excuse and prepared to go up the mountain to report to Master. Unexpectedly, the disciple guarding the mountain really stopped him and didn't let him go up. This immediately made him furious. The disciple guarding the mountain didn't dare to offend him, but he also didn't dare to let him go, so he immediately sent a message to Sikongju. After Sikongju arrived and understood the situation, he said coldly, "It's not that I don't want Junior Brother to go up the mountain, but Master has issued a decree that he has important matters to discuss with Senior Niu, and no one is allowed to go up the mountain to disturb him. Including me, no one is allowed to go up without Master's summons. Junior Brother, please go back for now." After mentioning Yin Baikong, what else could Jing Yuankong say? He could only go back with a gloomy face. This was just a small episode at the foot of the mountain, but it illustrated a problem. Although the World Commerce Association was rich and powerful, it was precisely because of this that there were unavoidable struggles for power and profit. And these two brothers had the same cultivation, and Yin Baikong couldn't be immortal. In the end, only one person could control the World Commerce Association. Who was it? Who won and who lost was still to be determined. The two people on the mountain naturally didn't know what was happening at the foot of the mountain. When Yin Baikong found out that other than the limit-breaking pill, he also needed the 7 treasure pill to raise his cultivation, he didn't seem unhappy at all. Instead, a trace of excitement could be seen in his eyes. Yu Qianqiu was even more confused, but he said without batting an eyelid, "Brother Yin, although I'm not a gentleman, for the sake of our future cooperation, I really have to advise you to think thrice before you act." These words made Yin Baikong smile slightly. Niu Yid's repeated dissuasion made him even more certain of the decision in his heart. At least one thing was certain, Niu Yid was definitely a person who did business with sincerity. He wasn't the kind of person who would leave after earning a sum of money. Yin Baikong was instantly reassured. It was extremely important to be able to build a business foundation of mutual trust with this kind of dealer from the immortal world. This meant that he would be rolling in money in the future. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.